across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I am your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'll be with you all the way to 10 o'clock. Stand by for 3 thrilling hours of breaking news, views and topical debate. Get stuck in, get involved, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. That's 0344 499 1000. Or WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I guarantee I'll play your message out. It's Wednesday, March the 19th. Here's what's coming up. An Iranian migrant who broke into Britain in the back of a lorry was allowed to stay because he suffers from depression. This despite the fact he's an Islamic State supporter and a court ruled that he was a threat to our national security here in Britain, proving that our obsession with mental health can be dangerous. He was subsequently deported until an appeal court decided he could face persecution back in his home country. And you know the rest of the story. He was allowed to stay. He hasn't got asylum, but he can stay because he's depressed. And if he went back to Iran, he could be persecuted. Madness. Meanwhile, a Pakistani man convicted of sexually assaulting a woman has been allowed to stay in the UK because he's gay. And of course would face persecution if returned to Pakistan. Wouldn't you think a judge might question this guy's claim to be gay? When is this madness going to stop? Why would a gay guy assault a woman? But according to a tribunal court, oh yeah, fair enough. We didn't realise. We thought because you sexually assaulted a woman that you probably wouldn't be gay. But you tell us now that you are. Oh, well, that's all right then. You can stay. When is this madness going to stop? When are we going to do something about these idiot immigration judges? 0344 499 1000. In other news, the true cost of the 1.2 million foreigners claiming British benefits has been revealed. A shocking 11 billion quid a year. Meanwhile, I'll bring you more astonishing details of how civil servants with taxpayer-funded government credit cards wasted £675 million on an epic scale. And guess what? It's got a lot worse since Labour conned their way into power. What a surprise. 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, is Kemi Badenoch a snob? Why does she think it's so terrible that Reform's Supremo Nigel Farage is a reality TV star? Doesn't she realise that lots of voters love reality TV? What a snob. 0344 499 1000. Plus, the latest from Ukraine after Putin rejected a full ceasefire and then ignored his partial ceasefire pledge to Donald Trump within hours. Also, Gaza erupts as Israel reignites its furious war on Hamas with a night of hellish bombing and Netanyahu's chilling vow that this is just the beginning. And finally, with England poised to follow Wales and Scotland by making smacking your kids illegal, is this a good thing? Or is it nanny state overreach? Is it the state's business whether or not parents physically punish their children? 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Wednesday night together. Right, I'm in a bit of a bad mood because getting into the office today, the studio, was a bit of a problem for me. You know, those of you familiar with London, we got the tube system, all these different lines. So I come in on the Northern Line. I get to the Northern Line, my normal station. Oh, it's on fire. severe delays. You can't go down there at Hampstead Station. Okay, so I get a cab across town to the Jubilee line, Swiss Cottage. Cost me about 15 quid or something, and it took about an hour through the traffic. It didn't take that long, but we got to Swiss Cottage. Guy standing there from Transport for London. Sorry, mate, station's closed. The entire line's closed. I said, why? It's on fire. I mean, so there I am, left with no way of getting to work at all, because it seems as if the entire tube lines are on fire. Welcome to London, folks. Good job old Sadiq Khan does of making this city run so smoothly. Right, well, that's my news. Let's get on with the real news. Let's go straight over to the senior fellow for the New Culture Forum, Philip Kisley. Welcome, Philip.
Hi, Kev. It's really nice to see you again.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Got a few stories to get through, some infuriating stories. Let's do the first one, as I alluded to in my monologue there. I think there are two aspects to this story. One is that our national obsession with mental health is turning into a serious problem, and as this story reveals, can actually be dangerous. This is the story of an ISIS-supporting illegal immigrant who broke into this country in the back of a lorry in 2017. He was subsequently ruled to be a serious threat to Britain's security. He was put in an immigration jail but then let out because he's depressed. He suffers from depression. So he was then allowed to walk the street. He was allowed to be a free man for several years, 3-4 years actually. He was released. He went to jail in 2021, was released in 2022 after this idiot judge decided that prison caused or aggravated his depression. So, of course, he was released. In July 22, the Home Office rejected his asylum application on the national security grounds due to his Islamist mindset. This guy is a fanatical supporter of the Islamic State. He has been electronic tagged ever since. He's not allowed to actually be here officially as a successful asylum seeker. His asylum seeker application has been rejected. But he can't be sent back to his home country. Guess why? Because if so, it would infringe his human rights because he may face persecution. I mean, that story is a story of our times in modern Britain, isn't it? He's not kicked out of the country. He's not detained because he's depressed. And then when push comes to the shove, when we finally say we've got to get rid of this man, he's basically a terrorist. He's a terrorist supporting Islamic fanatic. He's an Islamist fanatic, supporter of Islamic State. We can't send him back because he's going to get persecuted. So, A, he's depressed. B, he's going to get persecuted. I'm sure if we left these moronic tribunal immigration judges with more time, they could come up with some more reasons that he can stay. This is a danger to the people of Britain, isn't it? This process, this alleged legal process going on in modern Britain to this guy, it's just a disgrace. It's a scandal, isn't it?
It's just one of those stories where you think, you know, could anything get any worse? Could anything get any stupider? And then, hey presto, you read this story. So this is.
I mean, if you didn't, you laugh, but we should. If you didn't laugh, you'd cry. You know.
Yeah, if you didn't laugh, you cry. So it's the only response I've got at the moment, other than getting really, really angry with the whole stupidity of the thing.
Yeah.
So this is an Islamist snowflake, then, right? With mental health problems.
Maybe he got depressed, Philip, because the Islamic State's not doing so well these days. No, but apparently, seriously, this judge decided he was definitely suffering from depression, which was either caused or aggravated by him being in prison. So he was released.
Well, if ever I have to go to prison, that's when I'm going to say, oh, it's not good for me, this. I should be released. I suppose that's what happens when you go to prison. There's a danger that you might get depressed, and maybe you shouldn't be a potential Islamist terrorist in the first place. I mean, there's so much more to this story as well, which the more you read about it and the more it unravels, the more it reflects on us, actually, as just being so gullible and stupid and self-destructive. So the conditions for him not going to prison: one, he has to stay at one address; two, he has to wear an electronic tag; and three, he mustn't work. Okay.
Yeah, so he'll get benefits. He'll add, we're going to talk about that in a little while. He'll no doubt add to our enormous benefits bill that we pay foreign nationals here. More than 1.2 million foreign nationals are receiving British benefits. So no doubt this guy is only known as D8. By the way, Philip, I don't understand why we're never allowed to name these people. When you get these paedophiles in particular, who are a threat to British children, but we don't send them back to Syria or Iraq or wherever the hell they're from, because if they got back there, apparently in Syria, Iraq, Iran, etc., they take quite a dim view of paedophiles and he would be persecuted. Well, I regret to inform the judge who made this decision that we also take quite a dim view of paedophiles here in Britain, and we worry about our children. So we'd rather like you to kick them out of the country. This is after they come out of jail. It's just absurd, all of this stuff.
Yeah, and bearing in mind last summer as well, for the people who were protesting against atrocity in Southport, they were being named right, left, and centre. So this is two-tier justice. This is no justice. I think at the heart of this, I think the key for this story is the European Convention on Human Rights, and this gives these crazy, ridiculously woke, ridiculously cloistered judges the ability to make these ridiculous decisions, because a lot of it is about their quality of life and their human rights and their right to have a family life. So bearing in mind, a few weeks ago we had this judgment, didn't we, which was an Albanian criminal's son didn't like
the chicken nugget gate, yes.
Yeah, from other countries. So okay, well let's let him stay here then. There was a Pakistani paedophile who was allowed to stay here because it might not be great for his children in Pakistan. I've got news for them. It's probably not great for his children here with him, I would imagine. Okay,
exactly right. Exactly right.
So I think this is the crux of the situation. And I was just looking at this before, and the Telegraph have just done a poll on this, actually, about whether we should stay in the ECHR or leave it. 90% of, okay, the Telegraph readers, so they're probably going to think that, but 90% of people, and this is 200,000 people took the poll, 90% say we should leave it. And I think this is holding us to ransom, this bit of legislation.
Yeah, there's a very peculiar initiative on the part, not only the Tories say this, and Labour are now beginning to say this. The Tories say if they get into power, because Kemi Badenoch, we're going to talk about her in a little while, has this peculiar obsession with not leaving the ECHR. But the Tories are now saying, well, if we get into power, what we'll do is we'll ban migrants from claiming their human rights under the terms of the ECHR. Well, good luck with that when their immigration lawyers get hold of the case. And Labour are even saying that now. Oh, well, we want to stay in the ECHR, but we think we might ban migrants, asylum seekers, from claiming their human rights, their right to a family life. We might ban them from doing that. Well, you're either in the ECHR or you're not. You can't cherry pick the clauses that you fancy and get rid of the ones that you don't. So we either leave or we don't. I think there's another problem here, Philip. I absolutely agree with you. This should be the first step for this country, if it is to even remotely regain its sanity, is to leave the ECHR. It is the root of all evil when it comes to getting rid of these people who break into our country illegally. It is the root, in the end, probably, of most of our asylum seeker crisis. But we also have a problem with the judges the judge. If we had sensible judges, there's no need necessarily to interpret the ECHR. When somebody says, oh, I've got a right to a family life under the terms of the ECHR, if judges wanted, they could interpret it differently and say, I don't think you do, you're out. Same deal for if I go back to my country, I will face persecution. A right-minded judge said, well, I don't interpret the terms of the ECHR to mean that. The trouble with our judges now, reflective of our increasingly woke, stupid, socialist-minded culture, is they're left-wingers, they're Guardian readers. This is the way they think. So, yes, leave the ECHR, but we've got to do something about these judges. I suggest, controversial it may be, that we get an American system where we, the people, have power over our judges. We can get rid of them if we don't like the way they operate. These people, Philip, you must know this, they're answerable to no one. Under the British system, you cannot even reprimand a judge, let alone punish or sack them. We need to change that, I think.
Yeah, it's what's happened over the last few years. We've had identity politics, which has just infected culture and it's infected society, and now we are seeing a very definite manifestation of identity politics in the judiciary, and it's really frightening because it just makes an absolute nonsense of justice. It makes a nonsense of the system. What's happened is it's the very same people who run the mainstream media. It's the very same people who run the civil service. I've got a story about that later. It's the very same people who run the universities.
Absolutely.
You're right. They're absolutely answerable to nobody, and actually if the only people they are answerable to are themselves, because they make all the laws, they are part of, they run the institutions. So it's very worrying. It seems that we need an absolute shake-up, yes, a US-style shake-up to really change things, because if we don't, we are looking at serious trouble. Because once the judiciary goes, once people get in their heads, which they have now, that they will get no justice, right? That justice is ridiculous, that it's quite literally an ass. Once they get that in their heads, then we're in very
Exactly right. I'll give you a story to illustrate the kind of problem we've got here. You will have read it, I'm sure. You remember a few weeks back, a tribunal immigration judge called Hugo Norton Taylor. They're always called things like this. They're very left-wing, but they're very upper class, Oxford Eton and all that kind of stuff. He ruled that a Gazan family of Palestinians could come to live in Britain just basically because they wanted to, under the terms of a special law that was drafted for Ukrainian war refugees. So it was nothing to do, it was actually legally, it was totally wrong, but he decided he wanted to do that. And by so doing, technically that opened the floodgates. That meant that every single Palestinian, as things stand right now, every single Palestinian could, if they want, come to Britain because of Hugo Norton Taylor's ludicrous ruling. And Hugo Norton Taylor, guess what his dad does? He's a lifelong journalist at The Guardian and a fanatical anti-Israel campaigner, talking day in, day out about the genocide in the Middle East and all that. So, you see what I mean? That the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You get people growing up in this kind of household, they become judges, and then we get this ludicrous non-justice from left-wing beaks. And the people should have the right to judge the judges, and right now we didn't. Just before we moved on, I'm going to just give you another story. Just for you to digest, just to enjoy during the adverts. Another migrant, a Pakistani man, convicted of sexually assaulting a woman, has been allowed to stay in the UK because he's gay, and of course would face persecution if returned to Pakistan. I'm just wondering, wouldn't you think that a judge, when presented with this case, now let me just have a look at this. You say you're gay, but you've been convicted of sexually assaulting a woman. Wouldn't you think that a judge might sort of question his claim to homosexuality? At least have a look into it. It's just absurd, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're blinded by ideology. They're blinded by false compassion as well. Suicidal empathy.
Yeah.
And of course, these people are playing the system. You were just talking about that then, and I was reading about it before. And what I had in my mind was that image of the Scottish rapist who all of a sudden decided that he wanted
Isla Bryson.
Isla Bryson. Yeah, and all of that spurt of all of those types of people who thought, yes, we can play these people because they're idiots. Okay, that's what's happening in this country. But the rest of the world is looking upon us, okay, as a meal ticket. We are a freebie for them because they just think we're idiots and they can just play us any way we want. And once we've got open borders, it's crazy. We're going to talk about another story in a minute, which really illustrates that.
Absolutely. And when they think we're idiots, I'm sad to say, as things stand right now, they're absolutely right. We are an idiot nation when it comes to the migrant crisis, and indeed when it comes to a number of other issues. I don't say that happily. I don't take any pride in that. I'm really worried about what's happening to this country. We'll talk about something else to be worried about after this break, Philip. Be back in a moment.
We have a strong renewable sector in this country, and by the way,
don't.
We do, and China has a strong.
Hang on, Stanley. Most of this winter, right, which we are just emerging from, we have not been able to use renewables. We have not been able to use wind power or solar power because it hasn't been effective. And most of the heating and the generation of electricity that's been going on since before September in this country of last year has been thanks to gas.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Philip Kisley, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip, related to the last story that we were doing, a kind of migrant crisis type of tale, basically, we have in this country 1.2 million foreign nationals, call them migrants if you like, who are receiving universal credit or on welfare. So you wonder, well, you know, was that the idea? We just let them in so we give them welfare? Isn't the idea that they work or something like that? But anyway, the 1.2 million migrants claiming benefits successfully are costing us £7.5 billion a year in universal credit. £7.5 billion a year. Now, Robert Bates, he runs the Centre for Migration Control, good guy, regular guest on this show. He has analysed Office of Budget Responsibility statistics and worked out that apart from the 7.5 billion we actually hand them in cash, here's your weekly welfare money, enjoy. These people, these million unemployed migrants, are costing us an extra £3.5 billion in public spending, infrastructure, public services, housing, healthcare, education, public transport, etc. So altogether, we have 1.2 million foreign nationals who are costing us in benefits and infrastructure investment £11 billion a year. Is that the idea of immigration? You bring people in, they don't work, and we give them 11 billion quid a year. I don't think it is the idea, is it?
Well, again, I'm smiling, but it really isn't funny. You can have mass immigration, or you can have a welfare state. You cannot have both, okay? And it doesn't seem like mass immigration is going anywhere soon. So what's going to happen is we are going to lose that safety net for people who've paid into the system all their lives, for people who are genuinely needy and genuinely deserving. That is going to go. So we are going to be, you know, I think certainly within our lifetimes, we're going to be going back to something that looks very Dickensian for poor people, okay? And it's extremely worrying. Okay, this is on top, actually, of the stats that Centre for Migration Control gave us, was it last week or the week before, about who's getting convicted for crimes. So not only are foreign nationals costing us an absolute fortune in benefits and all of the costs surrounding that, because it isn't just about benefits, that's what this story is about, but also they're the ones who are being convicted for crimes, especially
sex crimes. What is it? I seem to remember 9% of the population of this country are foreign nationals, and foreign nationals are responsible for nearly 25% of sex crimes. So there's a serious disproportion there, and again, a very worrying statistic. So all these people who say, I mean, by the way, I'm sure I'm not against immigration. I mean, I quite like the idea in principle, but what we've got now is a rancid version of what it's supposed to be. This is just an absolute chaotic mess that is dragging this nation down like concrete boots. It really is. We're drowning in this stuff. But £11 billion, and you still hear left-wingers. I heard a Labour MP talking to Julie Hartley-Brewer today on her show, literally coming out with that old socialist cliche, immigration is good for this country, it's good for the economy. Not if it's costing us 11 billion quid a year for 1.2 million people who don't work.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I'm actually from an immigrant background. My father came to this country in 1959. He was a political refugee who left Hungary in 1956. He came to Britain. He married an English woman. He set up a business. What he didn't do was try to rewrite the culture in his own image or attack. Okay, yeah. And he wasn't part of mass immigration. There's immigration and there's mass immigration. They're two different things. So this used to be always the thing that they always used to say to us. So when people like me used to say, well, mass immigration is a bad thing, and they would say, oh no, but it's enriching, it's great for us, and you know, we get great food and all of that kind of thing. That was always the argument, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
But recently, we've been getting these statistics which have been coming out, which have been absolutely debunking all of those arguments. So they are just now throwing their heads in the sand, and they're just telling lies to us. I mean, one of the really incredible statistics is that, which came out quite a while ago, but I've got it here. Low-paid migrants cost more than £150,000 each by the time they reach pension age. Okay, so it's just completely and utterly unsustainable. And my horrible prediction that for many working class people, they are going to return to a Dickensian type situation in the future. I think that's going to, unless we do something now and radical about mass immigration, we are going to lose our infrastructure. And we know because we're already losing it.
And we're also losing in many parts of the country our cultural identity, which is another issue. But this cliche that the lefties always come out with, oh, immigration is good for the country, it's good for the economy. Well, it's not good for the economy if, as is the fact, about 99% of our immigrants, our migrants, are just unqualified fruit pickers, shelf stackers. I'm not having a go at fruit pickers and shelf stackers. Everybody's got to do that job. Fine if they're going to do this, but if they're not sort of decent earners, they're not good for this country economically. And when we find out that 1.2 million of them aren't even working, and in a sense, sort of people like you and me and everybody who is in employment are just working to pay our tax to give to these people who came to our country, many of them illegally. I mean, there's something sick at heart about this. And no wonder American Vice President J.D. Vance said today that Britain and indeed other European countries are stagnating thanks to the insanity of mass immigration. He said that we've been seduced by what I was just talking about, the allure of cheap labour. So most of our migrants, most of the people who come in here legally, and let's not forget that's about 1 million a year, incredibly, are low skilled. So we've been seduced by cheap labour. That does not do much for the economy at all. So we're being sold a lie here, and it's very damaging to this country.
I think, yeah, anything that's cheap, anything that seems to be a bargain really isn't. There's always, you always have to pay in life. You always have to pay for things.
No such thing as a free lunch, you know what they say.
There's no such thing as free lunch, right. And so what the kinds of people we're getting are, it's not just that they're costing us money. Okay, we're getting people of a tribal third world mindset who want to attack our culture, and particularly vulnerable people in our culture. So, you know, I'm up here in Leeds. I know lots of Jewish people. I've got lots of Jewish friends. Some of them are frightened to walk the streets. And I'll tell you what, Kevin, they're particularly frightened to walk the streets in places like Bradford. So we have, you said before that there is a cultural issue here. I think there is a cultural issue, and people need, and the government, the institutions, the media needs to do something about it. And of course they won't. So again, I keep coming back to this phrase that I keep using. It's very worrying. It's worrying on all fronts. It's worrying economically, it's worrying socially, and it's also worrying culturally as well.
Yeah, and of course we have a government, Labour government, who at the next election are going to really, really need the Muslim vote. So, you know, you'll get nothing but complete inactivity in terms of that cultural threat to this country on the part of the Labour Party, because they don't want to offend the Muslim community in any way whatsoever. They just want their votes. Now, let's go to break now, Philip. When we come back, we're going to talk about another scandal. This is a serious scandal. The amount of money that our civil servants are spending on taxpayer-funded government-issued credit cards. So they get credit cards. They're called procurement cards. The idea is if the office needs some new pens or something, they go out and get it. And the odd bit of entertaining, you know, a bit of lunch or whatever for visiting dignitaries or something like that. But when you realise that last year they spent £675 million on these government-issued credit cards, you might understand that somehow or other this situation has spiralled scandalously out of control. Stay tuned for that.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, Philip Kisley. Philip, we're talking about basically taxpayers' money tonight. We're just talking about how much we're spaffing on migrants' benefits. This is a serious scandal, if you ask me. The government issues, it was issuing 20,000 taxpayer-funded credit cards to civil servants. They're called procurement cards. Basically, it's if you need a few pens in the office or something like that, you nip down the shop, you would use one of these cards. So you start thinking, well, why do 20,000 civil servants need them? But of course, it does also encompass a bit of entertaining. You know, if you're in the Foreign Office, you will now and again, I guess, have to take people visiting dignitaries out to lunch or something. It seems to me that's a lot of cards to hand out, but hey ho. C'est la vie. The thing is, though, last year, we've been covering this story all week. Last year, they handed out, or they spent on these cards, taxpayers' money, an astonishing £675 million. £675 million. I think it was 2 years ago they spent something like £170 million. So it's been rocketing. Now, some of the things they've been spending their money on is quite eye-watering. We found out yesterday that Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, spent her office, we think it was for her, her office spent £1,200 on 2 ministerial files. We don't know what they are, but they're £600 each. It's basically office equipment. Now, what else have we got here? Foreign Office staff. By the way, what's interesting about this? So this is the Foreign Office, right? Foreign Office from July to October. What happened in July? Oh, I remember. The Labour government got in. A lot of this is post-Labour, post-Starmer. So Foreign Office staff from July to October shelled out £49,511 on beer, wine and spirits. A Foreign Office credit card was also used to purchase £2,493 worth of DJ equipment from a shop called DJ Superstar. Staff at the Cabinet Office, this is a particular favourite of mine, staff at the Cabinet Office spent £1,200 on Nespresso coffee pods in just 2 months. These new figures I'm going to give you now, we've revealed these are all new, those figures. £2,493 worth of £2,400 worth of shoes in Barbados, £920 on having fun at a Caribbean yacht club, 38 Foreign Office officials went to South Africa for some reason to attend Prince William's Earthshot ceremony, some kind of Earth, his ecological organisation. 38 of them went there. That cost us, on these credit cards, £87,000 in hotel bills. This goes hand in hand, of course. They've nights out on these cards have included places like Kyrgyzstan, the Philippines, Rwanda, China, America. These people are jetting around the world at our expense, basically. And if you add this to another big story we've been following all week. So I'm going on a bit, but this is a long list here, and it's worth telling the audience exactly what we're talking about here. That Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle, in 2 years, on 19 globe-trotting, jet-setting, glamorous trips, spent £250,000 on his parliamentary expenses. We're being taken for a massive ride by the political class, aren't we?
I mean, there was a time when, I mean, the stuff you've just read out there is just extraordinary, and there's something else as well. I think they were paying a company that did lifestyle, life-size Harry Styles.
Yeah, I've got that. That's I sensed I was going on so much. I left that one out. 673 quid they paid at the cutout store for a cutout of Harry Styles and one other pop star or something.
But again, there was a time when this would have broken and a channel like talkTV was running with it and really pushing it, heads would have rolled, you know. And I don't think they are going to now, because, as I said before, we've just become so stupid, and it's so awful and dreadful, isn't it? You know, at least, you know, when the Tory politicians were mired in sleaze years ago, at least they did it with a bit of style. You know, they were restocking boats for their castles and stuff like that. This is just trotters and snap.
They got their snouts in the trough. This is the entitled political class who think it's only right that we pay for their lifestyles. And the problem we've got, Philip, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and we do have a massive problem with this guy. You know, he had a portrait done of himself, cost £36,000. I mean, that's kind of official Parliament business, but seems a lot to me. He also got a common security pass for a rich Gibraltarian businessman who, funnily enough, had underwritten 4 or several of Lindsay Hoyle's glamorous free trips to Gibraltar. On which he took his wife. He also took parliamentary staff. We got a problem with this guy. Now, there are 650 MPs in the House of Commons. Take a guess at how many of them I've managed to persuade to speak out against the Speaker.
A big fat zero, right?
Zero, because, of course, if they speak out against the Speaker, he might not pick them to make their little speeches from the backbenches from which they think they will propel themselves into high office. It is a pathetic thing to see, I'll tell you.
Oh, there's just so much of this which is it just sums up everything that's going on today. So I was just looking at this story and I thought, wow, free money. How do I get one? Okay. So I went on the government website, and they've got a list of the benefits of these. You know, why all of these people have got these credit cards, and one is you don't have to raise an invoice. Okay, so it's easy. You just spend the money easily and quickly. You don't have to raise an invoice. You don't have to bother with nonsense. And the other one is, it's ecologically friendly. You don't have to deal with paper. It's all electronic, so it's good. It's the environment. It's good. There we go.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, what they've done now, Philip, though, I mean, the Labour say, oh, it's our duty to cut back on all of this. So, in fairness, they've spotted this absolute, you know, scandalous extravagance at taxpayers' expense. So, in fairness, the Cabinet or the government has said, right, all 20,000 of you civil servants with these cards have got to hand them back. And that's being done as we speak. However, apparently 10,000, half of them, will get the cards back. So they'll carry on having their cards. And check this out. Very strict measure here. Until now, guess what the limit has been that they could just spend, no questions asked, on these government cards? £2,500. That's an outrage. They're going to cut it back to £500. Still an outrage, I'd say. So there's still going to be 10,000 civil servants with these cards with £500 to spend if they fancy it. No questions asked. Our money. Something's got to be done about this. This political class, the body politic, the people in Whitehall, entitled people who think it's our job to pay for their lives. We've got to stop this.
Yeah, there's a sense of contempt, isn't there, for the public? And we're
the little people, aren't we? We're the little people, yeah.
We're treated as though we're stupid, and they can do anything, and we won't. Well, we won't fight back. We won't say anything. We'll just but we'll get on with our little lives, and we'll just watch the world crashing around, the country crashing around us. I think they're mistaken. actually. I really think they're mistaken. All the conditions are in place now. I would say, not that I'm encouraging it or anything like that, but all the conditions are in place for more social unrest. I mean, I used to look at a classic example is I used to look at stories of machetes and attacks and those kinds of things. And I was shocked by them. I thought, oh my God, what's happening? There are so many of them now, I don't even read them. I feel like a frog in boiling. I feel like a frog in boiling water. But every now and again, I check myself, and I have to be outraged at this stuff. I have to be concerned, which means I have to do something. And I get out there, I talk to people, that's my job. And I understand that people feel the same. And we're in a terrible situation here. All of these stories have connected tonight, and they all point to the same thing. They all point to unrest. They all point to unhappiness. And it really does feel as though they're treating us like fools. It's disgusting, and it really does make me sick.
It is disgusting, and it's, in my view, it's a mixture of scandalousness and also incompetence. So the way we talk about the migrant benefit bill, it's just incompetence. I mean, the benefits bill generally this week, with everybody's been talking about, it's an absolute mess. 815,000 cars, brand new cars given out to people with disability benefits. 1 in 5 brand new car. 1 in 5 new cars in this country is effectively bought by the government to hand to people who claim they are disabled or they deserve disability payments. 44% of the 815,000 cars that have been given to people with the disabilities have been given to people with mental health problems. Why do you need a car if you're depressed or you're suffering from anxiety? So it's part corruption, part utter incompetence, and somebody's got to get a grip. And I think you're right, Philip. The people of this country, we've got to stand up and say to the likes of Lindsay Hoyle, no more of this. You can't have our money to go on luxury holidays. He will say they were fact-finding trips. Why would the Speaker of the House of the Mother of all Parliaments need to go to the Parliament of the Cayman Islands to fact-find? What a ridiculous suggestion. I note that the Cayman Islands is a very nice Caribbean place. He doesn't go to Belgium or Siberia much. Always glamorous places. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, well, it is sunny over there. So, yeah, I mean, we do have to bear that in mind. OK, lots of people, and particularly young people who don't remember the trials and tribulations of the 70s, who don't remember the socialist governments of the 70s. Lots of people wanted this, OK, and they're getting what they wanted. They're getting a version of communism. Yeah. It's luxury communism for
party members living high on the hog while the rest of us pay for them. Yeah, exactly right. Listen, Philip, we better go to break because I want to talk about Kemi Badenoch and ask you the question: is she a snob? I'm going to do that next. Stay tuned.
we have a strong renewable sector in this country. And by
No,
the
we
way,
don't.
yes, we do. And China has a
We
strong
don't, look,
renewable.
hang on, Stanley. Most of this winter, right, which we are just emerging from, we have not been able to use renewables. We have not been able to use wind power or solar power because it hasn't been effective. And most of the heating and the generation of electricity that's been going on since before September in this country of last year has been thanks to gas.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, Philip Kisley. Philip, the question on the table is this. Is Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, a snob? Because she has taken issue with Nigel Farage, her rival, the leader of Reform, saying, she said, Nigel Farage is a reality TV star. You don't want him running your life. I've detected this tendency in Ms. Badenoch. She has a tendency to dismiss people, her political rival, saying, oh, he's not serious. That person isn't serious. Oh, he's a reality TV star. You don't want someone like that running your life. And she goes on to sort of go on about, this isn't I'm a Celebrity or Strictly Come Dancing. You don't vote for the person you're enjoying watching and then switch off when the show's over and so on and so forth. Well, I got bad news for her. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a reality TV star. And B, she might like to take a look at the electorate. She will find that millions of people who may or may not vote for her, probably not the way she's going, love reality TV. This is Westminster snobbery in action, I think, don't you?
Yeah, it's precisely what we were talking about before, but there's something else as well, isn't there? I'm just looking at the polls at the moment. So Reform are on 25%, and the Conservatives are on 21%. Okay, I mean, Reform didn't exist a few years ago. Okay, they didn't have any MPs before last summer. It's extraordinary what they've done. Yes, I know they're going through the mill at the moment and they're having problems, but I hope they're growing pains. I look at Kemi Badenoch and she is offering nothing. To the extent that I don't even read stories about her anymore. I know she's saying, oh well, net zero 2050 is not going to happen. Big deal, of course it's not. Right? I could have told you that. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, really, Kemi? Gosh.
This is how inconsequential she is as a leader, mainly because she is not a leader. She's not doing anything that is focusing on policies. Bearing in mind we had 15 years of the Tories, which they did the opposite of everything they said they were going to do. Okay, now they're not doing anything at all. All she can do is, it's very desperate, I think, when all she can do is attack someone who is 4% above her in the polls. Yes, he's going through problems himself, but at least he's doing things and at least saying things.
I'm taking no line on the Farage, Rupert Lowe fallout because I think that's a matter for Reform UK members. I mean, I've got a lot of time for both of those men. But Nigel Farage did himself a lot of favours when he was in I'm a Celebrity. I believe he came third, if I remember rightly, and the people liked him. It boosted his popularity. I just don't like snobbish politicians say, reality TV, I mean, come on. A lot of people like reality TV, and if she doesn't understand that what she's being there is flat out snobbish, then she's not fit to do the job she is supposed to be doing. You've got to be more of a woman of the people, I would suggest. Whatever you think about Farage, he connects, and Kemi does not connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are disdainful, again, there's that word again, and if you show contempt towards the country's popular culture, then you are not part of that culture, okay? And a leader, the leader of the Conservative Party, should be very much part of that culture. Look towards Margaret Thatcher. She was exactly that. She never showed contempt towards working people. All she wanted to do was help them. And I suppose the other thing you've got to bear in mind as well is the fact that there's another reality TV star, isn't there, across the Atlantic, who's making a hell of a splash and who seems to be doing very well. You know, you might not agree on everything.
Good point. Good point. Mr. Trump, of course. Again, a man of a very privileged background, but he connects with people because he doesn't look down on them. Miss Badenoch has got to cure herself of her superior tendencies. She's looking down on the masses there because they like this trash TV, in her view. I quite like reality TV sometimes. And it feeds into this sort of snobbish Westminster line, you know, that's populist. Oh, populist, that's populist. What does populist mean? It means the pursuit of policies that are popular. Oh, well, we can't have that, can we?
It means understanding what people want and actually going some way to doing what people want.
Yeah.
This contemptuous looking down on British people. It's all of those things, isn't it?
It's exactly what we've been talking about this whole hour, isn't it?
Yeah, all of this stuff connects. And when I was listening to when I was watching,
have to be quick, Philip.
Yeah, I was thinking she was going to use the word gammon. It was that bad.
Yeah, I bet she was probably that close. Philip, brilliant. Thank you very much. See you next week. I'll be back in just a second.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is the second hour of the Political Asylum tonight. Now, I want to ask you a question. I don't know if any of you out there are lawyers or you know about the law. It's something that's been bugging me for a while. You know these migrants, these asylum seekers, who get their applications turned down, rejected. You know, you can't stay here, sorry. You know, you shot 500 people back in your home country and you're a drug dealer and therefore we are deporting you. And then they appeal. So they're allowed to stay because they appeal. And then a court might decide again, no, you're still a drug dealer, you're getting deported. They appeal again. And then just keep appealing until they finally succeed. The reason I ask this is an Albanian man, this story is dropping in the Times right now as we speak, an Albanian man who tried to enter the UK illegally 4 times. He came in in a lorry. He attempted to enter illegally by air. Kept trying to break into this country 4 times. He kind of made it. Anyway, we've been trying to deport him. His last conviction was for Class B drug production. He was growing cannabis to sell. He was caught watering it, apparently. Anyway, he's been allowed to stay because that offence has been ruled as not a serious enough crime to deport him. He's broken into this country illegally 4 times. So he kept being turned down for asylum. Wasn't allowed to stay, and he kept appealing. So my question to you, if any of you know, because I genuinely don't, is there a limit on how many times these migrants, these asylum seekers, can appeal against rejection? Because as far as I can work out, they just keep doing it. So as soon as they're deported, they're like, oh, you fail, you've got to go back to Iraq or Iran or Syria or wherever it is. They just appeal, and then they're allowed to stay. They fail again. They appeal. They're allowed to stay until finally one of their appeals succeeds. It's part of the crazy process, the mad merry-go-round of our insane migrant crisis. So I genuinely don't know. Is there a limit on the number of times that these asylum seekers, migrants, can appeal against a court deciding they must be deported? If you know, let me know. 03444991000. Now, much to come this hour. In a little while, we're going to talk about Donald Trump and Putin, that remarkable... I'm trying to work out how long that phone call was. They said it was 90 minutes, and then they started saying it was more than 2 hours. Anyway, they had a very, very long chat. We'll decide just how productive that chat was. At least something's being done. You know, a lot of people saying, oh, well, you know, Putin didn't really do what he promised to do. Look, what I say is, at least Donald Trump is trying. I think the world owes him a debt of gratitude. He's trying here. He's trying to stop that horrible war in the East. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Also, this hour, I'll be taking your calls in half an hour, and that's important. 03444991000. But before we get to your calls in about 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes, at last... I don't know if you noticed this horror kid, this monster, this 19-year-old Nicholas Prosper, who shot dead his mother, brother and sister last year, was on his way to slaughter 30 kids at the primary school he used to go to. Nice guy. Luckily he got arrested before he was able to carry out that massacre. But he didn't, like so many of these little cowards, like that crossbow guy, Kyle Clifford, last week. I'm not going to the dock, I don't want to face my sentence. Oh, I don't want to listen to the victim's statements. I don't want to. So we've always gone, oh, that's all right, then don't bother. Well, 2 years ago, Rishi Sunak brought in legislation that means defendants can be forced into the dock. It's just that judges don't ever seem to want to do it. So Kyle Clifford last week didn't want to come in, and the judge said, well, he's in a wheelchair. You know, it wouldn't look good if we had to force him. I don't care what it looked like. You know what he did. What the hell? Force them into the dock. And force them to face justice, force them to face their sentencing, and possibly most important of all, force them to listen to the victims' statements, the people their crimes, their lives have been ruined by them. They make the statement, force them to listen to them. Anyway, hooray! Finally, a judge today did just that. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb. Well done, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, forcing this little tow rag, Prosper, into the dock where he had to face the music. We'll talk about that in just a little while. Now, let's get back to Ukraine, the ceasefire that in a way never was. Let's go over to California because he's permanently trapped there. He's actually from London, Republican Overseas Organisation here. Errol Moorcoach. Hi, Errol, you still there?
Yeah, still here, still doing my sentence.
You're getting old, you know.
I know, grey hair.
Well, listen, thank you for joining us. Dramatic scenes yesterday, a 90-minute, maybe a 2-hour phone call between Trump and Putin, the upshot of which, of course, Trump calling for a full ceasefire. Some of the papers here today, Daily Telegraph, just came flat out and said it in their big headline, saying Putin rejects Trump's ceasefire call flat out. I think that was slightly unfair. He did get Putin to agree to a partial ceasefire where Putin said Russia would no longer, or at least for a 30-day period, would not attack Ukrainian infrastructure. By that we mean power stations, transport systems, the kind of things that help a country get by. So Putin agreed to that. The trouble was about 3 hours later, he launched this massive attack on Ukrainian infrastructure in a city called Slavansk, I think, knocking out the local power grid and depriving 100,000 residents of electricity. So he made this pledge to Donald Trump and then just ignored it. Now, I want to preface this by saying I think the world owes Donald Trump a debt of gratitude. I think what he's doing is in its way magnificent. He's trying to bring peace to a horrific war where hundreds of thousands, millions of young men are dying, in frozen fields in the east. He's trying his best to stop this. He had to wait an hour for Putin to pick up the phone, which I thought was extremely rude of the Russian leader. But he did it. Donald, he wouldn't have swallowed that easily, but he did it because I think he thinks it's important. And they came to at least a partial agreement, and then Putin just ignored it. Your thoughts?
It's a difficult one to unpack because on one hand, I'm with you in that camp that is thankful that this president is doing anything towards detente. Now the question is, did anybody believe that Vladimir Putin was going to be, the most trustworthy partner at the table? Probably not. It's incredibly disappointing. It's a setback for Trump. It's a setback for what we've thought we could do for Putin to have sent that strike so immediately after giving his word. However, I think that is why Donald Trump then moved on to the suggestion that perhaps the Americans should take some sort of cursory ownership of these power structures, therefore mitigating potentially this fact. But I won't sugarcoat it. I mean, when you're late to the phone call, it's disrespectful and it's not necessary. And when you're going to immediately renege on your commitment that you've made, it also doesn't look good. So I think right now we need to at least take what we can get. The 1 month ceasefire, let's see if we can hold that ceasefire. I mean, there's a lot of bad blood that still is going to be, ironed out as the war winds down. If you look at the end of any conflict, there's always the awful battles that happen 2 days after a ceasefire, back in the day and stuff like that. So there's going to be mistakes made, and it's certainly not off on a great footing. And I think maybe it's Vladimir Putin showing a little bit of a power play, saying, hey, look, I can do what I want. And within some degree, maybe it's a domestic play for him, a way to show his domestic base that he's not just meeting and bending the knee to Donald Trump. And if that's what it took to then allow him to then work towards a bigger peace agreement, I think maybe there's a positive there. But this is going to take more negotiations. This is going to take Ukraine, obviously, eventually at that table. So right now we're trying to wind down hostilities and stop the killing. If this can lead to that, I think it's a positive. But unfortunately, it's not the start we hoped for.
No, I mean, as you say, Errol, I think it was always a foregone conclusion that Putin would play some games. The difficult dynamic here in terms of Donald Trump was, I think that you know, obviously he did very well with Zelensky. He brought Zelensky into line, you know, unlike most Europeans or British people. I didn't think it was the worst crime in the world that perhaps, you know, Zelensky was treated slightly robustly when he was in the Oval Office. I didn't care about that because I thought it was leading to something, and it did. It's led to serious concessions on the part of Ukraine. It's led to the mineral deal, clearly will be done, and that could in itself help preserve peace in Ukraine. So he's got Zelensky and Ukraine, Donald Trump, exactly where he wants them. They're basically eating out of his hands and saying, what do you need us to do? We'll do everything you want, which is good because, you know, you can't make progress unless you have agreement. Now, the problem with that is Putin is desperate to prove he's not Zelensky. Russia is not Ukraine. It's like, yes, you got what you want with Zelensky. Don't you assume for a moment that you're dealing with the same. I'm much more powerful than Zelensky. Russia is much more powerful than Ukraine. So in a way, I think he was always going to make a power play. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a strong point, and I think it speaks to the domestic image that he has to maintain. You're very right to point out that he can't fold as quickly as Zelensky did. Unlike Zelensky, he actually has some cards. They might not be better than our cards, but in the short term game that he's playing, he has a lot of cards. I think perhaps it's something that Vladimir Putin can take as a small win, but also it's something that Donald Trump can look at and perhaps understand the situation. Maybe Donald Trump didn't read the room as well as he could have, and maybe if the negotiations had been conducted a little bit differently, now knowing that Vladimir Putin has an image to upkeep, I think one thing that you can look at is economic integration. You have Russia being the #2 aluminium supplier in the world behind China. So if you were to, for example, welcome Russian aluminium back in the market, all of a sudden you would pull Moscow away from Beijing, who is now buying all of the aluminium. These kind of very specific little things you could do to reintegrate Russia back into the international world order, I think, is something that would give Putin the, let's go with national prestige he's looking for. He doesn't like to be a pariah per se. He doesn't mind it. He's obviously not scared of being chased away from Brussels for 6 years or whatever, but ultimately he does want to be
Lucky guy.
Yeah, I know, for him. But ultimately, he does want to be back in the world market. And if you look at things like energy, which is the one thing that we can use to bring down global prices for everything, there's a lot of Russian energy. So perhaps this is something where Donald Trump needs to use his business mindset and realize that maybe Vladimir Putin's looking for business deals. Vladimir Putin doesn't care about the lives he's lost there. He doesn't care about those guys. He doesn't care about the Ukrainian lives. He doesn't really care about international law and world order. But what he does care about is perhaps enriching his cronies and the companies that run Russia and ultimately reintegrating Russia to the world market, as opposed to having to sell everything through India, through the back door into the market, which has been very beneficial for India, but not maybe very good for anybody else. And so I think maybe that's somewhere that Donald Trump needs to take this, because it needs to become a business negotiation, it looks like. Perhaps military negotiation will be ameliorated through economic integration. But obviously then people will accuse us of allowing Russia to make money doing this and that. But then we have to point out to the Europeans, well, hey, you've been buying oil from this guy, funding his war. Why don't we end the war and perhaps take some of those minerals out of Russia in exchange for trade? Let's try that. I mean, versus continued war and death. I mean, it's worth a shot, I think.
I agree with you. And again, I think you cannot stress enough that what Donald Trump is doing is to be admired. You know, you can talk about, oh, America's going to make trillions of dollars out of this mineral deal. Well, fine, you know, hey ho, that's the way of the world. But if that brings about protection for Ukraine and brings peace to Ukraine, then I think we should all get behind it. What worries me, Errol, and let me know what you think, is so far Putin does not seem to be displaying much of a sense of compromise. It's arguable that what he's saying is, what I require of Ukraine is complete surrender. You know, I keep all the territory that I ever wanted. You're not allowed to have a peacekeeping force. You can't join NATO, and so on and so forth. I mean, Donald is going to have to get some compromises out of Putin. Do you fear that he will remain intransigent, or do you think that down the line Putin and the Kremlin might be a little bit more malleable than they are at the moment?
Yeah, I think the Kremlin is going to have to be more flexible. They had some realistic demands that you can expect, and then others that were unrealistic. For example, they demanded that we stop sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Well, we came out pretty quickly and said that's not going to happen. We're not going to stop sharing intelligence. That's not the same thing. Now, when it comes to the territories in the East, I don't think Vladimir Putin has any incentive to give any of that back. The only credit I can give President Putin, I suppose, is that it looks like he did allow some of those Ukrainian soldiers to retreat out of Kursk, where they had been encircled reportedly. Now, there's a lot of counter misinformation and narrative intelligence and all going on there, but there did seem to at least be that one glimmer of hope where there was a situation where Trump came out and talked about Putin promising to let these soldiers retreat. You saw open source intelligence media sort of verifying that. So there was, some silver lining there. But I think ultimately they're going to have to come to some agreement. A peacekeeping force of 100,000 European soldiers in Ukraine perhaps isn't going to be as useful as perhaps a smaller one. Maybe there'll be a size situation. NATO, I don't think many people in America want Ukraine to be part of NATO. And I think that the concept of having a buffer zone between NATO and the former Warsaw Pact or Soviet Union or current day Russian Federation, whichever dream you want to put together, the point is NATO membership isn't in our interest per se, so I think that's something that we could easily work with the Russians on.
I agree. I agree with that. I think that is the least contentious issue. Ukraine.
And in regards to the mining, also, it's a 50-50 split. If you were to do this deal with a mining company, it would be 90-10 for the company that's putting all the expertise and everything, and the host country gets 10. That's how Africa has been strip mined for the last 100 years. So 50-50 is really actually pretty charitable. In terms of this mining contract. It is meant to bolster Ukrainian domestic industry, which then by default would have pried it away from the Russian sphere. If the Americans hadn't been so foolish in their soft power, we could have slowly pulled the Ukraine into our orbit over 20, 30, 40 years. And instead, now we have to try to work with the pieces that are left. But I don't think Putin's going to give up his area. Like I've mentioned before, there's about $20 trillion of resources. 500,000 guys died for that. That's $40 million a guy. I mean, that's a good return on your investment. If you are a brutal dictator, why would you give that up?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't.
Absolutely. Now, I think that the watchword here is we should all watch and wait. I mean, this was never going to be done overnight. We didn't expect that phone call. Hey, we've finished the phone call. The good news is the war is off. It was never going to happen. So I think it's a bit by bit, little step by little step. And I think we should get behind Trump as he tries to end this war. The one thing I'd say about Donald Trump, people say, he's always got an angle. Yeah, he has kind of always got an angle, but genuinely, viscerally, you can tell that guy hates war. He just does not like war, and we should support him in that endeavour. Final question, Errol. The Sun newspaper over here today, the headline was, "What the puck?" Insofar as Putin and Donald Trump agreed to a ice hockey game between America and Russia. Who would win that?
I mean, the good old red, white, and blue. We would crush them, just like in the Miracle on Ice. We've got to do it. It's already written.
Well, I'll tell you what, Errol. Sometimes diplomatically, maybe you should just lose. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. In this case, maybe. Yeah.
It's all a chess game. Errol, fantastic to talk to you. Can't wait for you to. When are you getting back to London? Do we know yet?
Around the end of April.
All right, we've got to get that beer in. Good to talk as always. Thank you so much. Errol Moore, coach from the Republican Overseas Organisation. He went to see his folks in California at Christmas, had a car crash, and has been stuck. He's injured. He can't get on a plane. He's been stuck there ever since. But it looks like he's getting back towards health and will be back in London soon. When we come back after this break, we're going to talk about that teenage monster who was forced into the dock today at long last. A judge showed a bit of backbone, forced him into the dock against his wishes, made him face his sentence, face the music and listen to the victim's statements. About damn time, don't you think? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about that next.
I think the problem Kate Badenoch has with this is twofold. One is that she's naturally going to be outflanked by Reform, and Nigel Farage yesterday came out of the traps and said, well, I've been banging on about this for years while you were actually voting for the 2050 target back in 2019. But then also the point that you made to Esther McVeigh earlier, which is that many people in her party still are really signed up to all of this stuff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, today, something good happened, as far as I'm concerned. I think perhaps my guests will agree with me. Actually, since 2023, Rishi Sunak brought in legislation that empowered judges to force defendants into the dock. Hitherto, they didn't have to be there for sentencing. So that, I think, is a crucial point. That is when the state declares its power, the power of its justice. This is what you are sentenced to. You hereby go to jail for 5 years. The state has spoken. It's important. They were allowed to avoid that, which they shouldn't have been, in my view. But possibly more importantly, they were allowed to refuse to face the victims' statements. They could cower down in their cells, not be in the dock. And this is the moment where the victims, usually the relatives of those killed, the people who've been, whose lives have often been ruined by the crimes committed, stand up and they read their often extremely moving victims' statement. A process that was rendered slightly ridiculous sadly ridiculous last week with that guy Kyle Clifford, the crossbow killer, who slaughtered his girlfriend, raped her and her sister and her mother, killed them, killed all three, raped his girlfriend with a crossbar. and then fortunately shot himself as well, and he's rendered disabled. He's now in a wheelchair, and he refused to face the victim's statement, which was extremely moving. It was, the poor father who'd lost everything, lost his family. When the judge was told, he won't come up, so somebody suggested, well, we should force him out. And the judge says, he's in a wheelchair, that would be inappropriate. Who cares? I think it should be compulsory every time. But it is now within the gift of judges to decide. And usually, I don't know why it is, most judges seem to be Guardian readers these days, so they usually decide, that's fine, he can stay in his cell. Well, today, here's to Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, the judge presiding over the case of Nicholas Prosper, the 19-year-old monster who shot dead his mother, brother and sister last year before being arrested, luckily, on his way to his former primary school where he planned to massacre 30 pupils with his shotgun. He specifically planned it to be on Friday the 13th. Luckily, he was stopped before he murdered the kids, but he did murder his own family. Now, this little coward, characteristically, I'm not going to face the victim's statement, I'm not going to face the sentence. And the judge said, yeah, you are. This was at Luton Crown Court, and she delayed sentencing. She'd get him and bring him here and put him into the dock. So good for Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb. Here she is talking about just that as she passed sentence.
I was told at 8:45 this morning that you were refusing to attend court. I ordered that you had to be brought. You do not want to be here, but it is not your choice. You have to face the consequences of your actions, to hear the court's sentence passed in public, and it is important for those who loved your victims to see you sentenced. The facts underlying these convictions are chilling.
Well, a magical moment, if you ask me. So I didn't introduce you, don't I? It's barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn, a man who knows a thing or two about the way our courtrooms work. That was a significant moment on the part of Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, wasn't it? Good for her.
Good for her, and it was a very measured judgment. And what I liked about it was about 45 minutes where she unpacked the case, all of the circumstances, went through the rules and regulations. And you'll remember I spoke about this beforehand, about Sarah Munro was the first judge to do this when the rules were changed about broadcasting sentences. And the whole idea is to get trust back in the judiciary so people understand the cases. I always say trust comes in on foot but leaves on horseback. And trust in the judiciary, we had a number of cases where it was diminished as a result of, as you say, defendants not being in the dock, as a result of what appeared to be lenient sentences. So justice not just being done, but being seen to be done. And that's what happened. So 45 minutes, she unpacked the case. Horrible, horrible circumstances. All sorts of questions have been raised about access to firearms, the material he was seeing online, and so on and so forth, and working on that sort of basis. So questions need to be answered about that sort of side. But unpacking why he got the sentence that he did, and you compare it to other sentences, it explains what happens. And the starting point, they were talking about the difference between a whole life sentence, which means you never, ever, ever get out, and what's called a life sentence, but with a minimum term. And a minimum term, and that's what it is, it's a minimum term, doesn't mean it's automatically going to come out afterwards. It means it's at least 49 years before he can go to a parole board to decide whether he's fit to come out.
So this was the sentence. This was the... as I just said, there are two aspects to this. It's very important, in my view, that defendants should, I think, always face their sentence.
Absolutely.
That is the key moment in the case of the state against a defendant. A moment where the state dispenses its justice to someone who has broken its laws. Yeah. Really important. The fact that we just allowed generations of crooks to just say, no, I'm not going to do that, I think is bizarre and kind of warped. But the victim statements, so last week, Kyle Clifford, the crossbow killer, he wasn't in court. because the judge thought, oh, it'd be pretty bad to put a bloke in a wheelchair. But rubbish, who cares? Now here's the grieving father and the widower of those poor women who Kyle Clifford killed. The racing commentator, BBC racing commentator John Hunt, he reduced the entire court to utter tears.
Yeah.
You could have heard a pin drop. His statement was stunning. Absolutely stunning. And the fact that Kyle Clifford didn't have to be there to listen to it, I think is a disgrace.
No, you're absolutely right. As always, it is a disgrace. And thank goodness, as you say, for Mrs. Justice working on that sort of basis. She forced him. She said, I'm not going to sentence you until you're actually in this court. So all credit to her. And hopefully that will now be the pattern for the future. People need to be in the dock whilst they get sentenced and put down on that sort of basis.
Exactly right. And strange that for so long we allowed this. I think this emerged. I remember covering a story. It was some awful rapist, who chose. I read about it, and then we did a story on here on Talk, and I remember I said, "What do you mean? What, he just decided he didn't want to be there?"
No, well, you and I spoke about it in this very studio. We did, and we looked at that sort of side. And you were saying at the time you would drag them up, handcuff them if necessary, and
but I think we should do that.
Yeah,
I think we should do that. They say, "Oh, we don't want these unseemly scenes." Okay. Clear the court if necessary. If necessary, put them in a damn straitjacket, handcuff them, gag them. Don't let them shout and scream. Gag them and make them listen. I mean, the state shouldn't be weak. At these moments, it should show its power. That is the whole point. This is the power of the state in action, and it should be seen.
Absolutely. And the other thing they were looking at is actually increasing the sentence if people still refuse. I mean, you can still drag them up for the reasons you've mentioned, but if they still refuse, they would say, well, actually, that will go into making the sentence even tougher as a result. But you're absolutely right, and as I say, all credit to the judge in this case for making sure that happens, and hopefully that will be the precedent for what we've done, so people get a faith back in the system, and you need to work on that premise.
Let's just talk quickly about the sentence. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb drew some criticism for not sending Nicholas Prosper to jail for the rest of his life, a whole life sentence. Instead, he got minimum 49 years.
Minimum 49 years. So what it is, it's a life sentence, but they basically say you have to serve a minimum of 49 years. What that means is not automatically you come out. After 49 years, you go before the parole board, and they work out whether you could go out. If you do go out, you're still out on licence, so if you do something else again, you could be back in, and so on and so forth. So you need to look at that sort of side. But she was very measured in what she did, and there were three reasons. One, his age at the time. He was 18. You might remember Kudwara was 17 at the time and could have got a whole life sentence. He basically only got 52 years, I think it was. You looked at that sort of base. He also pleaded guilty, which they said was a factor. And the thing they're talking about, he was thwarted in his mission. He wanted to do the biggest gun massacre of the century. That's what he wanted to do. And he was thwarted in that mission. Basically, his mother woke up and saw he had a gun.
Bravely stopped.
And basically, he murdered his brother and also his sister as well. So the three of them. And they're saying, some of the reports saying that actually, had it not been for those three and their bravery, he would have carried on and gone to the school, his primary school, where he was going to intent on murdering little children.
It does. I mean, I take all that on board. I can't get too energised or furious about the fact he's got 49 years minimum. Could be more, don't forget. I mean, that does seem to be a pretty stiff sentence.
Yes.
But a lot of people say, well, look, what he did, murdered his mother, his sister and his brother in cold blood with a shotgun, off to murder, if he could have done, 30 little kids at a primary school. If that doesn't warrant a whole life sentence, what the hell does? But as you say, there are these mitigating circumstances, pleading guilty, not causing too much trouble to the system, as it were. But nevertheless, the Shadow Justice Minister, Kieran Mullen, has written to Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, asking or seeking an increase to this sentence, saying that it's unduly lenient. I wonder what will happen there.
Well, I can tell you what will happen, because the same happened with Rudy Cabana. They wrote to the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, and he basically said, no, it doesn't make sense. The judge acted correctly in that case. It wasn't a whole life sentence.
Mind you, Hermer is a lefty, isn't he?
Well, there we go. That'll teach you. But the reality was exactly that. So it would mean putting the victims and their families through more trouble. It was one of his factors. And unless it's really obvious that the judge erred on the wrong side of the law, then it's difficult to overturn it. But the whole idea, and there have been 100 cases, and when we looked from 2021, where they have said the sentence was too lenient, and it has been increased as a result. So we want to restore, as I say, going back to the idea of trust in the system. The trust in the system, say if the sentences are too lenient, there is a mechanism for correcting that.
Well, listen, folks, let me know what you think. Should all defendants be forced into the dock? Come what may, no matter what. So no longer, I would suggest, it's not a matter of the judge's discretion, that every defendant should face their sentence and, as I said, arguably more importantly, the victim statements. Be made to do it. If necessary, gags, earphones, make them face the music. What do you think? And secondly, did Nicholas Prosper deserve a full life sentence, a whole life sentence, or are you satisfied that 49 years minimum is enough? Let me know. 03444991000, and a big thank you to Andrew Eborn. Excellent stuff as always. Thank you, Andrew. We'll be back in a little while. We'll take a couple of your calls. Stay where you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's go to the phones. We're going to talk about the Gaza war in a little while, by the way, after the next break, because it's all kicking off there again, as you probably heard. So we need to check in and find out what's happening in the Middle East. So that next. But first, let's go to Harrow and talk to Herbie. Hello, Herbie.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say.
Indeed.
It looks like we've got common sense at last coming back into the justice system. This man, although he got 49 years, I think it's time for the judges now to say murder means life, and it means life. No 49, no 36 years, life. They've taken the life so they can sacrifice their life. And as for not attending the court to speak and see the judge, It's out of order. This man is an animal. He needs to face whatever he's going to be facing with, and I think they should all be doing that.
Absolutely, I think they should all be forced into the dock, into the dock. At the moment, as I said, Herbie, you probably picked up on that. It's at the judge's discretion, and perennially they always say, "Oh, don't worry about it. Leave him down in the cell." Well, this judge today. She changed the dial, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb at Luton Crown Court. She got to her job. You know, she's sitting there on the bench saying, "Where, you know, we've got to do the sentencing now." She goes, "Where's the defendant?" "Oh, he's chosen not to be here. He's chosen to stay in his cell." And she said, "As he hell, bring him to me, bring him here." And he was forced into the dock. And I just think that should now be the system. No need for a judge to decide. All defendants are forced to face their sentence and the victim statements, yeah?
Face the music, you know, they created problems, you know, they've ruined the families' lives. So why should they get away with it by demanding what they want to do? I'm sorry. Your civil liberties have gone completely. Finished. End of story. That's it. You come and face a judge, and I say life for life. It's got to be. It's about time it came in.
Yeah, because the thing is, Herbie, when they say I'm staying in my cell, I'm not going to face the sentence, and I'm not going to face the victim's statements. That gives them a moment of power. That makes them more powerful than the state at that moment, and I don't think they should be allowed that. The state should say, "Sorry, your backside is ours now. You know, you broke our laws egregiously, and you're going to find out what that means. Get in the dock. Your days of calling the shots are over." So I couldn't agree with you more, Herbie. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much for an excellent call. Herbie in Harrow. We've just got time to talk to Georgina in London. Hello, Georgina. You want to talk about Whitehall spending? Good, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's not good. I'm absolutely disgusted by the fact that this government and civil service are having a financial field day with our taxpayers'
with our money. Our money.
It's a classic case, Kevin, of easy come, easy go. But for us, who've got to work for it in the UK, it's not easily earned. The taxation we endure is absolutely eye-watering, while our genuinely disabled and old-age pensioners are having benefits cut or completely taken away. I don't know which is more infuriating, them lying to us or them thinking that we are so stupid in this country that we actually believe their lies. The whole system is totally corrupt, and it needs to be doged, as you've done in the UK. This government is trying to...
We need an Elon Musk. We really, really do. This is out of control. And Georgina, at the epicenter of this, I think I know you usually tune into the show, so you've been hearing this story, is Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Mr. Speaker, who's been round the globe at great expense, £250,000 on, I think, 19 glamorous foreign trips to places like Los Angeles, Australia, the Caribbean. When he was in Montserrat, he even chartered a private jet. He spent thousands of pounds on chauffeur-driven limousines, stayed in hotels that cost £900 a night, goes on 4-day trips that cost £40,000, all at our expense.
Well,
he said, you know, this is just wrong. We're being taken for a ride by entitled people who believe that this is their right.
Yeah, well, he'll be ordering a new passport because the one he's got's full, and we'll be paying for that as well. This government are trying to give us the same demise as Edward II. I'm not going to say it on air, obviously.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah,
it's family show, Georgina.
Yeah,
family
absolutely. Show. Edward II, and they want us to smile while they're doing it, Kevin. Yeah. They're knocking the financial stuffing out of this country and hoping that we, the people, stop kicking. And unless we have a major turnaround, with this government, there'll be nothing left.
It's up to us. It's up to us, Georgina. We're not going to smile anymore. We're not going to take... We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take this anymore. We've got to make a stand. Georgina, great call as always. Thanks very much for ringing. Let's talk again soon. Georgina in London there. Going to go to break now. When we come back, we're going to talk to Jake Wallace, Simon, Jewish journalist, about the situation in Gaza. Obviously, that war is very much back on. That next. Stay tuned.
think the problem Kemi Badenoch has with this is twofold. One is that she's naturally going to be outflanked by reform, and Nigel Farage yesterday came out of the traps and said, well, I've been banging on about this for years while you were actually voting for the 2050 target back in 2019. But then also the point that you made to Esther McVeigh earlier, which is that many people in her party still are really signed up to all of this stuff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. The truce, the ceasefire in Gaza is over. January the 19th, a couple of nights ago, Israel unleashed a night of bombing. 400 people across the Gaza Strip were killed, or more than 400, more than 500 injured as well. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, says that this is only the beginning. What Israel wants, quite reasonably in my view, is the release of the remaining 59 hostages, only 24 of whom are thought to still be alive. Think about that. Release of 59 hostages, some of quite a few, more than half of them are already dead, and they've been down there since October the 7th in those hellhole tunnels beneath Gaza, held by Hamas. And Netanyahu says that this bombing is only the beginning. Let's talk to former editor of the Jewish Chronicle, author of Israelophobia, and a columnist in the Daily Telegraph, Jake Wallace-Simon. Thanks for joining us, Jake.
Good evening. Hello.
I mean, what is the problem here? Hamas just will not give up these hostages. You know, when you get the usual sort of David Lammy brigade, you know, denouncing the resumption of hostilities, what else was Israel supposed to do? I mean, they are doggedly holding on to these poor people in those tunnels, so many of them dead. I mean, they're just the sort of the thought of that, the image of that, you know, release the 59 hostages. By the way, only 24 of them are alive. That's horrible in itself. When this truce was going on, when the ceasefire was in existence, and you got this kind of grotesque spectacle theatre that Hamas were making of the releases, playing showbiz music and giving them hostages goodie bags, getting the hostages to say, oh, thank you so much, you were wonderful hosts, and so on and so forth. They abused the spirit of the ceasefire anyway, and frankly, I think you can see that Netanyahu is very, very angry, and I would imagine that the Israeli people are too. What else was going to happen except a resumption of the war?
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget the fundamentals here, which are that this war shouldn't have happened. And the reason it happened was that almost 20 years ago, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, spent all of the aid money and Qatari money on turning it into a garrison strip, a terror enclave, and then on October the 7th, 2023, launched an attempt at genocide of the Jews living alongside the border. That's the reason why the war started, and of course took 200 hostages, of which about 24 are left living. So I think there's a sense to sort of normalise the taking of innocent men, women and children as hostages, and then to use them as bargaining chips to end a war. That's not normal. You know, those people should never have been taken from their beds and from their homes and their families. They should never have been kept in Hamas's dungeons. They should have been returned immediately once they'd been taken. And yet here we are 17 months later, and 24 of them are still there. in the dungeons under Gaza. So Israel is quite within its rights to wage war to get those people back and to destroy Hamas so that this abomination won't ever happen to its citizens again. And David Lammy and the rest of the free world should be supporting Israel, because Hamas is not just against Israel, it's against us too.
What is it that Hamas think they're doing now? I mean, what is it they're clinging on to? As I just said, you've got 24 people still alive down in those tunnels. What are they gaining by the imprisonment of those poor people, apart from, you know, Israel unleashing all hell on it increasingly? I mean, Netanyahu saying that from now on there will be no talks unless against the background of this ongoing war. It's getting worse and worse and worse. So what do Hamas think they're gaining from this?
Well, I think the first point I'd just like to make about those 400 casualties that were reported overnight, we don't know how many of them were combatants and how many of them were civilians, which is an important point. Hamas always plays that same trick of making out that they're all civilians. But setting that aside, the thing about these negotiations is that they are very unusual. They're a zero-sum negotiation. Netanyahu, Israel, cannot tolerate Hamas to remain either in power or in existence after October the 7th. And Hamas is never going to back down from its charter, its objective to entirely destroy the Jewish state. So each side wants the entire obliteration of the other. And between those two sides, there's no room for compromise. And Hamas knows that the only reason why Israel is dignifying it, if that's the right word, with these ceasefire deals and exchanges is because it holds the bargaining chips of the hostages. As soon as those hostages are out of the dungeons and back on Israeli territory, there'll be nothing stopping the IDF from finally putting the last nail in Hamas's coffin. And so it's loath to release all the hostages for that reason. And the brinkmanship that Netanyahu is engaging in is trying to get as many hostages as Hamas are willing to release. And when they really won't release any more, then it's got to be game over for them.
What did you think of our Foreign Secretary David Lammy's response to the resumption of hostilities, just stepping up and saying that Israel blocking aid convoys going into Gaza was against international law? That was the response of the British Foreign Secretary. Don't you think he could have done a bit better than that?
Well, Lammy's response was utterly risible, frankly. I mean, it's the equivalent of saying that our bombing of German cities during World War II broke international law because of the civilians there. We should be feeding them and providing them with electricity and water at the same time as trying to wage war on their military machine. It doesn't work like that. He's not living in the real world. And it just seems like what really gets his blood up is the Israeli retaliation when it's been provoked by hostage-taking and by atrocities, by rape, by mutilation of its civilians. That's what really gets the Foreign Secretary's goat. When it's Israelis being attacked and being, raped and murdered and so forth, that doesn't quite move him as much. Really, he should be standing full square behind our democratic ally to get the hostages home and finish off Hamas. That's in all of our shared interests, and we mustn't lose sight of that.
Going forward, Jake, what do you predict? I mean, more of the same, more of these extraordinary airstrikes by Israel, because it was a couple of nights ago. That was a hell of a night, even by the standards of this conflict. I think it was the worst bombing, if you could put it that way, the most fierce bombing since 2023. So going forward, is it going to get worse and worse and worse? What's the end game here?
Well, we're seeing preparations taking place on the ground for the full resumption of hostilities. The 252 Division, an infantry division, has re-entered the Netzarim corridor, which is a strip of land that bisects Gaza, which Israel withdrew from before as part of the deal. It's now gone back in there and half conquered it again. We've seen the Golani Division, another big infantry division, move to the border of Gaza in the south, preparing for combat. So it does look like the war is going to be going once again full throttle. And I say that with no sense of satisfaction at all, because of all the human suffering that entails. However, we must bear in mind, as I've been saying, that the two objectives of the war, which are to get the hostages home and to destroy Hamas to prevent the further threat in the future of another October the 7th, have not yet been achieved. And until those two things have been achieved, it's difficult to see how there could be any other way forward other than the resumption of hostilities.
Going back to those hostage releases, we've got about a minute left. What were Hamas playing at? I mean, they were taunting, Israel. They were taunting the West, with these disgraceful scenes. Why did they do that?
I think that it's easy for Westerners to miss the fact that Hamas are not like us. They don't see the world in a compassionate, humane way in the same way as people in the West do. They are deeply cruel, deeply fanatical, and have no sense of compassion for anybody who doesn't adhere to their fanatical version of Islam. And so all of those, propaganda spectacles were all about trying to psychologically torture the Israeli public, trying to dig the knife in as deeply as they could to the families, to the friends, to the relatives, to try to create as much unrest and dissatisfaction and anguish against the government as possible, and also to try to win props in extremists around the world. Absolutely depraved.
Absolutely. And some of us still stand with Israel, Jake. All the best. Thank you very much for your time. That's Jake Wallace-Simon, Jewish journalist, former editor of the Jewish Chronicle, columnist now, very good columnist in the Telegraph. I commend him to you. When we come back, we're going to debate smacking. Should you be allowed to smack your kids?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back in just a little while, about 20 minutes or so. We'll go over to the phone lines, we'll take your calls. I'll play out I'll play out all of your WhatsApp voice notes, because I always pledge to do that. Read some of the messages and texts that you've been kind enough to send me, so lots still to come, and the floor is yours as of about 9:20 or so. Now, let's talk about smacking your kids. It's probably... This is the moment where people of my age, people like me, go, "Oh, my pa, I always get smacked when I was a kid, never done me no harm." Well, I did a bit, both by my parents and my teachers. Those were different times, folks. And it really didn't do me too much harm because I was never beaten up. I was just sort of smacked, and caned at school as well. I don't yearn for those kind of days to come back. But I do wonder about countries that make it illegal, that make parents who smack their kids criminals, if you like. So in Wales and Scotland, it is illegal to smack your kids. In fact, there are 67 countries around the world that have banned parents administering physical punishment to their children. No smacking, nothing. 67 countries. So Scotland and Wales, you can't do it. England, you can. A lot of people say, well, so hang on. So if you're up in Berwick-on-Tweed, that's just south of the Scottish border, drive a mile, so you can smack your kid there, drive a mile, and then you can't smack your kid. There's something slightly ridiculous about this. But I suppose the issue is, if a country brings in a law to ban mummy and daddy from smacking little Johnny, the kid, is that state overreach? Is it the business of parents whether or not they tap their kids or smack their kids? Or is it the business of elected politicians? What do you think? 03444991000. Well, let's have a debate about that. On the kid smacking side, that's not really a very fair way of putting it, is it? Chloe Dobbs, political commentator. Welcome to the show, Chloe.
Hello, Kevin. Thanks for the lovely introduction.
Yeah. The kid smacking enthusiast, Chloe Dobbs. No, she's not.
Don't clip that.
She just agrees with me that maybe it's not the state's job to decide what parents can do. And on the other side of the fence, we've got writer and activist Rebecca Reed, who does believe that it should be against the law. Well, let's go to you first, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us. Why do you think it should be illegal for mothers and fathers to smack their kids?
So I think when we have the smacking debate, we're actually having two debates. One is, do you think it's right or wrong to smack children? And one is, should the state be involved in how you raise your children? Now, in terms of whether you should or shouldn't hit kids, it's pretty clear cut. Like, the evidence is very much in favour of it doesn't help your parenting. It can really hamper your parenting. Most people agree that in an ideal world, you probably wouldn't be hitting your kids. The more difficult debate is, should the state step in? So I'm quite a naturally libertarian person. So, for instance, I turned down having health visitation when I had a baby because I didn't want somebody coming into my house and telling me off because I wasn't breastfeeding. So I don't like state intervention. However, I am pro the smacking ban because it seems a bit mean to be an English person saying we've let the other countries do it first, watched how it worked, and now we're going to steal their good ideas and ignore their bad ideas. But it has been legal in Scotland since 2020 and in Wales since 2022, and it does seem to be an effective law. It hasn't resulted in parents being hauled in front of the courts because they lost their temper in Sainsbury's and smacked the back of their child's leg. What it has done is that the social services have reported that it's been supportive in being able to act more quickly, because at the moment it creates a bit of a grey area where if a child is being hit, and children aren't hyperverbal until their later childhood. So if a 4 or 5 year old is telling you, yes, mummy hit me, to then have to say, okay, well, what force did she use and what mark did it leave, leaves the social services in a very difficult place. So I think it is about enabling us to do better in preventing child abuse, which we know has sadly been on the rise since lockdowns. And we've seen some horrific cases that perhaps could have been less likely to end the way they did if there was a full force blanket ban on any hitting children.
Good point, well made. We're talking about this, Chloe, because Labour MP Jess Sato has tabled an amendment this week in Parliament to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. Now, the law in Britain at the moment says that it is unlawful to hit, this in Britain, in England, it is unlawful to hit your child except where it is reasonable punishment. Now, what Jess Sato wants is to take away or remove the reasonable punishment bit, so it just becomes unlawful to hit your kid. So it is a current issue right now. I mean, this week, the future of kid smacking in England is hanging in the balance. My problem with the very good point that Rebecca just made is, I think that if you make this illegal, it's on the assumption, that every parent who smacks their kids is likely to go over the top. It demonises parents, you know, who may feel, for example, if little Johnny or little Janie is running towards the M4 motorway, that maybe, you know, a kind of short, sharp shock to say, you know, really don't do that might be a good thing. And whilst, you know, obviously you're going to demonise and condemn horrific cases like Sarah Shah, etc., obviously. I think that the trouble with making this kind of thing illegal, it is on the assumption that, you know, parents just won't be responsible here. I think that, you know, except in very rare circumstances, parents will always be responsible about smacking their kids. They won't beat their kids up. They'll just now and again give them a little tap to say that was over the top. So I don't approve of smacking kids. I don't have kids, but if I did, I know I wouldn't smack them. But I don't think the state should be involved in decisions that should be made by parents.
Yeah, so a few things to say on this. So first of all, just looking at the laws that we have, it seems as though the laws are actually already quite strict. Now, there are horrible cases where those laws have not been followed appropriately, action has not been taken, and we had, of course, that tragic case of Sarah Sharif, who was horrifically abused, and there was no doubt there that the parents were breaking the law time and time again, and the appropriate interventions had not taken place. What we're talking about here is very different. We're talking about things like a bit of a smack on the back of the wrist. We need to make sure that, you know, maybe there is a bit of a grey area when we say reasonable punishment, but making sure that that is well defined. But you talk about parents being demonized here, Kevin, and you mentioned the case of, you know, if your kid's about to run out into the motorway, and I was looking earlier at a column that a woman had wrote in the Telegraph talking about her experience as a parent, saying, I think smacking is horrendous and it's not good for kids, but we all make mistakes as parents. And I had a case when my kid suddenly ran out into a busy road and nearly got hit, and I was all panicked and freaked out, and in the heat of the moment she gave him a little smack on the back of the wrist, and there were other parents around and she felt very embarrassed. But did people think, oh, this is a woman, you know, we need to call 999, this is a woman who needs to be reported to the police? No, everyone makes mistakes as parents. And although maybe it's not good for kids, do I think a little smack on the back of a wrist is something that is extremely traumatizing to a kid? No. Do I think that the parents being brought to the police, potentially kids maybe being taken away from their parents, all this social services getting involved over a smack on the back of the wrist, that's probably more traumatizing to a child than the smack on the wrist itself. So it just seems like a bit of an unnecessary intervention. Also, just uses of police time and social services time. We've clearly had cases where the law has been broken and appropriate interventions have not taken place. Shouldn't we be focusing the resources of police on social services on the serious cases where kids are genuinely being abused and really need help?
Absolutely. Rebecca, when they brought in the law in Wales and Scotland, everybody said, oh, well, every naughty little kid is going to start shopping their mum and dad to the police every 5 minutes, if only for a laugh. And actually, that didn't happen. But going back to sort of my youth, a long time ago, obviously, in another century, literally. I mean, physical punishment of kids was just generic. You know, your mum and dad would whack you if you were out of line, and you get to school and you get whacked by the teachers. And I don't remember, that was not a time when there was vast mass physical abuse of children. Physical, I mean, you know, has physical abuse of children got less or more since then? I think it's pretty much the same.
I think the extreme fringe cases of true abuse are probably roughly the same, though I do think that extreme religious groups of all denomination are particularly bad for it, and there are perhaps more of those because social media makes it easier to radicalize people. But in terms of the "it didn't do me any harm" argument, the thing that I always find so interesting about that is that, so I did some dominatrix work in my early 20s, and every single...
This is interesting. Go on.
Every single male client I had, and they were all white men over the age of about 40. Every single one of them would tell me stories about being beaten as a child.
Well, so it's trying to relive their sort of torture.
And
How fascinating, really.
Literally relive in the outfits, like using the names of teachers. And I have other friends who did a similar line of work, and every single one of them will tell you the same story. So you might think that all the blokes you know came away from it unscathed, but some of them may well be having to spend quite a lot of money to live through that trauma. And these were good, nice, decent men in every other walk of their life.
Well, it wasn't just the guys that got hit. I mean, it was guys and girls. Everybody got hit.
I've never met a woman, but I think corporal punishment in schools was generally speaking focused on men. And I've never, and also I could tell you names of people you would know who are doing this, who are in powerful positions, genuinely. And I don't think I want the decision makers of any country to be people who are that shaped by having experienced what they described as ritualized abuse at boarding school. So fundamentally, yes, of course, a little tap on the back of the wrist might not shape you for the rest of your life, but you just don't know. It's very easy to not hit your kids, and then they're not going to have to give money to nice ladies in leather.
But I think, we can talk about old funny stories about kids. We can talk about old funny stories of people being caned in school. I remember my mum telling me that they'd come round with a ruler to check your skirt is the right length, and you'd all be lined up with the cane if you didn't have a skirt that was long enough. But we're not talking about caning here. We're talking, within the law that we already have, if you cane your kids, you will most likely be considered to be breaking the law. I don't think they would consider that to be reasonable punishment. We're talking about little things like a little smack on the bum or on the back of the wrist. I'm not saying that is necessarily
punishment.
But this is the
I'm
issue.
not saying that is something that is going to make your kids... We know that the evidence generally shows that positive reinforcement is better than negative forms of punishment to make your kids behave well. So I'm not saying it's a good thing that we should encourage. Absolutely not. But do I think that the state needs to get involved and 999 needs to be called if you smack a child on the back of the wrist, little tap? No.
Doesn't that worry you, Rebecca, state overreach?
I mean, it always worries me because I don't like the state being involved in any of my business. However, I would just make a couple of clarifying points. Firstly, that the reasonable force thing is the issue here, or reasonable punishment, because who decides? Who is the arbiter? And there is some guidance, but it's not very clear. Some of it is about how much of a mark you leave, but children of different skin tones mark to a different extent. So you could hit a white kid and it might come up with a big red mark, but it wouldn't necessarily on a black or brown child, which then plays into the fact that actually certain communities are more likely to hit children anyway. So the expression reasonable punishment is not fit for purpose. But similarly, just like as a point of clarity, you are not supposed to call 999 if you see someone smacking. You are supposed to call 101 if you have reasonable concern. And there is no suggestion that automatically means you have your children taken away from you. The next natural step is that the social services have a conversation with you about how this happened. So again, I don't want social services in my business. Nobody does. But if you are regularly losing your temper to the extent that you are smacking your child, then actually social services might be able to be a source of support.
If it's regular, what worries me here, Chloe, I mean, if there are people who regularly beat their kids up, obviously that needs to be brought into order. And by the way, if we do make it illegal to smack your kids, and I see, I'm not the sort of person who probably do this, but if somebody saw someone, a mum or a dad, smacking their kids, they're perfectly entitled to phone 999 because that's what... No, they're perfectly entitled to do that. If you see the law being broken, you can dial... dial 999. Yes, you can.
999 or 101, both of them are calling the police and getting the police involved. I mean, if your house is getting burgled, you call 999 and they say, "Oh, call 101 instead." It's not that important. So I don't think that really makes that much of a difference.
Well, let me ask you both a last question. First, you, Chloe. I mean, what worries me about this is, I would suggest that for 99.9% of parents, the perfectly reasonable, sensible thing to do is to leave decisions about bringing up their own children to them as opposed to the state. Is that not the decent way forward?
I think generally speaking, yes. I don't think I would apply that rule to absolutely everything, because if we just say, oh, parents can bring up their kids however they want, then that is saying you can hit your kids as hard as you want and beat them up and abuse them, right? If you say the state shouldn't be involved at all, of course there are extreme cases where the government shouldn't get involved, but it just feels as though the government is creeping in more and more. We're now hearing that the government is going to have to be responsible for teaching your kids how to brush their teeth and whatnot. It just seems like it's creeping in slowly but surely.
Yeah, same question to you, Rebecca. Don't you feel, or don't you worry that this is taking for the vast majority of parents, decent parents, 99.9% of them, this is taking decisions about how to bring their children up out of their hands and put it into the hands of the state? It doesn't seem right to me.
The state already has a big say in how you raise your children. And actually, one of the big failures of the state is, for instance, children who haven't gone back to school post-lockdown are often in cases of being very poorly homeschooled or being, in some cases, abused. That is an underreach of the state. So I don't think we get it right all the time. I think the social services often, for instance, I am a posh white woman, I would get away with things that somebody of a different ethnicity or background wouldn't get away with. I think social services interfere in the wrong places, in the wrong ways much of the time, because they're badly funded and staffed by 24-year-olds with no training, no support, who are trying to change the world while being very badly paid. So I don't think we're getting it right, but it's not about overreach, it's about wrong reach.
OK, good point. Well, look, good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much. Chloe Dobbs there, political commentator. Rebecca Reed, writer and activist. What do you think? Bringing up kids, if you feel, is the decision whether or not to smack your kids, and I'm not talking about beating them up, I'm talking about a tap, to say, look, you went too far there, don't do that. You know what I'm talking about. Reasonable punishment. Should that be a decision for parents, or should it be a decision for the state? I know which way I lean on that one. Let me know. 03444991000. When we come back, your calls, your messages, your WhatsApp voice notes. So lots still to come. You better stay tuned.
But I did speak to an attorney who has sat in on some of these hearings and spoken to some of the parties involved, and he believes that the Heritage Foundation will appeal, and that this document, despite it being very difficult to read for you or I, gives them enough ammunition to properly argue their case going forward. And that case is that Prince Harry's status, or if not status, but whether he was truthful or not, is a matter of public interest.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'll read some of your messages in a little while, but before we get to that, let's go straight to the phones. Let's talk to Steve in Leeds. You want to talk about smacking kids, Steve? What's your point?
Yeah, I've listened to you two people that you've had on about smacking kids, and it seems to me that they both live in that left-wing world where the worst thing a kid ever does is Tarquin doesn't pack his school bag correctly. Yeah. Now, I come from the real world, the working-class world. My daughter was born at 12 pounds weight. Right, so by the time
big girl, yeah.
Yeah, by the time I got to 3, she was a half a head taller than every kid in her nursery.
Blimey.
I got called to the nursery because she was basically bullying the other kids. She was taking their toys because she was big enough and hard enough to do it, right?
Right.
So the nursery said, your kid's bullying the other kids, what we're going to do? So I took her outside and I gave her a good crack on the backside, and it made her cry. And I said to her, listen, love, this is how it works. She was 3 years old. You can't explain to a 3-year-old how the world works and expect them to understand that the weaker people need support from more stronger people. I'm bigger, you're smaller, I'm taking it. When she got that crack, I said to her, right, every time I get called to this nursery, because you're
you get another one of those, yeah?
You get another one of those.
And I know how this story ends, Steve. She never did it again?
She didn't, but the point I make is that the parents chastising the children, Kevin, right, teaches them that the law is there to defend the weak against the strong. Yeah. We now live in a world where we've got 14-year-olds stabbing 15-year-olds, 12-year-olds raping 13-year-olds, because nobody's taught them that there are consequences to your actions.
It's such a
and
good
all
point.
These do-gooders keep saying, oh, children are innocent, they're wonderful people. They're not. Unless somebody stands up early on in their life, and I'm not talking about beating a 12-year-old, because by the time they get to that age, it's no good.
Yeah.
At the age of 3 to 5, if they don't understand that there's a law involved, whether it's your parents' law or the government law, they'll never grow up to understand that the law's there to protect everybody.
I think I agree with you, Steve. What I think about you're obviously a good dad, and it's your daughter. And you believe this was the way to discipline her. You didn't beat her up. You didn't bully her. No. You pulled her into line. That's my point. Is it may be other kids you shouldn't do that to, but it's your kid. It's your decision, not the state's decision. It's not a bunch of politicians in Westminster's job to decide how you bring your children up, is it?
Kevin, very quickly, I'll tell you a story. I lived opposite a guy. Right, him and his wife were both on the dole. Well, whether on the dole, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I watched him one day slap his child, who was 5 years old, against the head. I walked over the road and knocked him out.
Yeah, that was
because I said to him, "That is out of order." Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a difference between abuse and discipline.
See, but I totally agree with you, Steve, and I think that 99.9% of parents. In the days when you could smack your kids, were like you. I mean, my parents, I didn't get hit all that often, but I did now and again. And when I got to school, I got hit by the teachers. I got caned by the teachers. I'm not calling for that system to come back. But I'll tell you what, most of the kids, people say, oh, it's so traumatizing for the children. We didn't, when we were kids, we didn't even think about it. We just thought, well, if you step out of line too far, you're going to get clocked one. That's the way it was then. I really don't think, I'm not calling it for to come back, but I really don't think it was quite as kind of dreadful as people make out today. They don't understand. But Steve, what a great call. Thank you very much. Please call me again. Very sensible. Steve from Leeds there. What do you think about what Steve said there? Very good points I thought he made. Let me know. 03444991000. I think we've got time. Let's talk to Chris in Epsom. Hello, Chris.
Hey, evening, Kevin. I'm with you and Steve. I was brought up that way as well. I was 64, never did me any harm. My father kept me on the straight and narrow with a quick crack now and again.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I phoned actually about Lindsay Hoyle, the government's, the civil servants. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting.
Isn't it?
I've owned companies and had employees. I've also worked for other companies. I don't know one single company that allows you to spend £5 without producing an invoice and a reason for why you spent it, let alone 500 quid. What is going on?
Well, look, I'll tell you, Chris, you know, I'm an old Fleet Street man, I'm a newspaper man, and you've heard about journalists' expenses. You know, I had expenses. I lived very well on them, you know, and the company often paid for excellent sort of entertaining that I had to do in the line of my job. You know, really good deal compared with what most people have with their jobs. But let me tell you, Chris, it was nothing like what we're talking about with these civil servants. Nothing like that.
No, I mean, I come from I spent 9 years in the travel industry, a very senior level, and I entertained foreign ministers for travel. I entertained presidents of airlines and hotel chains.
Well, entertainers, yeah.
I had to put their names down and account for what I did.
Oh, yeah, we had to fill in all the forms, that's for damn sure. That's the whole point. You know, they just get this card, and until this week, they had a £2,500 limit on it. That's a lot of money.
That was shown with the 2,500 in Barbados in shoes.
Well, listen, that's true. I've never thought about that.
Lindsay Hoyle, right?
Yeah.
Let's add a little bit of context to this, right? We started off with this government with their noses in the trough, all getting free glasses and clothes and trips and this and that and the other. All right? That's how it started. So let's not forget that. We've also forgotten that Angela No-Brainer Rayner used her civil servant staff to not only move her furniture from one flat to another, but to clean the new Grace and Favour flat. Nothing's been done about that yet. We've not heard about the parliamentary
I'll tell you what we haven't heard about, Chris. We haven't heard any explanation from Lindsay Hoyle about all this travel because there's no investigation, because not a single MP, all 650 of them, have got the guts to speak out about this, because Lindsay Hoyle's the guy who calls for them to speak in the Commons, and they think that's their moment in the sun, and that's where they're going to become the next Prime Minister, because their speech is so dazzling, so they cannot criticise the man who allows them to make their pathetic little speeches.
Kevin, listen, with Hoyle as well, a couple of things. I can explain his trip to the Cayman Islands, because don't forget that after the date of when they had to declare who had given the Labour Party money, the day after that date, they received £4.8 million from a hedge fund in the Cayman Islands.
Oh, no, hang on. We've got to be a bit careful there. We don't know what... I mean, I think he was on a fact-finding trip to go and have a look at the Cayman Islands Parliament, but I don't know the intimate details of what he was doing there, and I can't start implying that somehow or other he got the Labour Party some money. I think that would be unfair and unproved. But listen, Chris, really good call, though. Really good to talk. Call me again. Chris in Epsom there. Let's go to break. I've got lots of WhatsApp voice notes, and I've got messages to read, calls to take. I'm so busy. So stick around.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's just I'll go back to the phones in just a second. Let's do a couple of WhatsApp voice notes. This is Anna on Broken Britain.
Evening, Kev. So what about the mental health of the endless female victims? We don't seem to matter because they want it to happen. It's for no other reason than the systematic destruction of this country so they can rebuild it how they want it. We're irrelevant. There will be civil unrest, if not civil war, eventually, because you're making it too complex. The reason it's happening is because they are allowing it, because it is what they want.
Yeah, I mean, Anna, there is a sort of feeling that everything is falling apart at the seams, that this is broken Britain. Something is fundamentally wrong here. Our benefit system is wrong. Our migrant crisis is just ludicrous. Everything is mad. These crazy judges, this net zero nonsense. It's absolutely insane and very worrying. I think you're right. This is broken Britain. Well, let's play another WhatsApp voice note, shall we? This is Gaza on migrant benefits.
Hi, Kev. This massive migrant benefits bill, why isn't Kemi Badenoch challenging Keir Starmer on this at PMQs? Forget that she might fear that he'll turn around and say, well, the Tories this, the Tories that, blah, blah. That time has gone now. That time has long gone. Nearly 9 months in power, and it's just going up and up and up and up. She's fully justified to start asking this question and demanding answers and not diversion as usual.
Good point, Gaz. Absolutely. I mean, I think Kemi Badenoch, I mean, most people seem to feel she's getting slightly better at Prime Minister's question times, getting slightly better at being leader of the opposition. But so far, I mean, she's pretty much been a disaster and doesn't quite seem to know when to challenge the Prime Minister, when to get up and speak out about anything. Let's give her some credit, say she's on a learning curve, but she's got a lot to learn. That's for sure. This is from Mark. He said, brilliant show. You are brilliant and so politically astute. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, right. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Christchurch in Dorset and talk to Joe. Hello, Joe. You want to talk about benefits?
Hello, Kevin.
Hi.
Great show, mate. You're amazing.
Well, thank you
for what you do.
Thanks
for all of us.
Thank you.
What I want to say is that I've been looking after a brother for about nearly 30 years.
Sorry, what did you say about your brother? Sorry.
I've been looking after my brother.
Oh, you're looking after your brother? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, for quite a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to look after my dad that's 86 years old.
What's wrong with your brother, if I can ask, Joe?
He's totally blind and he suffers from paranoid schizophrenia. And it's very tricky, this one, because, it's a big umbrella with this one because it can affect people different ways.
Yeah.
And I'm on a capability for work, which I do 3 morning shifts per week.
And the rest of the time you have to look after your dad. You're a carer for your dad and your brother. I think what you're working towards, Joe, is there's a lot of benefits cuts in the air right now. You are obviously someone who fully deserves. You're what the welfare system is all about. And are you fearing that you'll get some of your benefits cut?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because I'm on a capability for work thing, and I do have PIP because sometimes I forget to eat, and people have to remind me to eat. Because there's some days I don't eat that much at all. For example, the last 2 days, I didn't eat anything until 3:15 in the afternoon. I thought I hadn't eaten anything.
You should have some breakfast, mate. Get up and have breakfast. It's good for you.
No,
it's good for you. Yeah, it's the most important meal of the day. You should do that, Joe. But are they taking? Are you going to lose money out of these benefit cuts?
Do you know what? It's not so much that. It's just the fact, I'm trying to keep my family together because, family are supposed to look after their family.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and that's what I'm doing. You know, but I'm just wondering who's watching my back. You know, and.
Well, hopefully, I mean, hopefully the government's watching your back. Hopefully you'll get your fair and reasonable payments because you deserve it, because you're looking after your old dad and your poor brother. So you're the sort, and so you can't work full time, obviously, looking after those two guys.
I can't because I'm.
I get it, Joe. I get it, Joe. So what is worrying and disconcerting about our benefits bonanza chaos? Is that too many people are getting loads of welfare money that don't deserve it, and that ends up being damaging to people like you who definitely deserve it. So that's why we need to sort the system out so that the people who deserve it get welfare, and the people who don't deserve it no longer get welfare.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've worked all my life since 16 years old, and I've paid my tax, I've paid my national insurance, I've done those things. I became unwell, and when I was well again, I was able to help my brother with his things, and you know, and I managed to get myself a job with Co-op and eventually with Waitrose, which have been really supportive.
Good for them. Well, good for them. Listen, Joe, I've got to move on, but
no, it's okay. Thanks.
But good for you. My regards to your dad and your brother. And you know, you sounds to me like you're a hard-working guy, and you fully deserve the benefits. And what is annoying? It's not people like you that are annoying. You are what the welfare system is for. What is annoying is all the people who are taking the rest of us for a ride and basically conning this nation out of benefit money. And you're not one of them. So, Joe, great call. Thank you very much for ringing. All the best, Joe in Christchurch in Dorset. Let's go to. Let's do a WhatsApp voice note, shall we? David on the ceasefire in Ukraine, or should I say the non-ceasefire?
Good evening, Kevin. You cannot appease a tyrant. You cannot appease a dictator. You cannot appease a crocodile, because the crocodile will come back for more and take bit by bit. This is all wrong. Zelensky was right. Putin does not want peace. If he does want peace, it's not going to be at any price, is it?
I mean, you know, I take your point, David, but the point is, you know, a lot of wars tend to involve countries that are run by tyrants and dictators. Tyrants and dictators tend to like wars, Putin being no exception. That doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't pursue peace with them, because war is wrong and peace is preferable. So I think Donald Trump is doing a remarkable thing, trying to chase peace, trying to force peace. As has been proved, it's going to be a very difficult process. But good for him for trying. And, you know, Putin might be a tyrant, he might be a warmonger, but he's worried about Donald Trump, and that is a good thing. So good luck to Trump in all that he's trying to do, but it isn't going to be easy. We know that. Let's take another call, shall we? Let's talk to Carl in Liverpool. Hello, Carl. You want to talk about smacking your kids?
Yeah, you're all right. Yeah, good, thank you. So I think now parents, and I mean, I got a clip when I was a kid, growing up in the 80s and 90s, and it never really did me any harm. But I think now with parenting, they'd much rather stick a phone or an iPad or some sort of technology in front of the kids rather than have a conversation about what's right and what's wrong and disciplining them in that way where
that's a good
they
point.
Understand it.
Yeah, if you're talking about, Carl, if you're talking about, like, you know, forms of child abuse. Now, I don't think that a tap on the back of the leg or something to warn a kid that he or she has gone too far is child abuse. But if you overdo it, if you slap your kid round the face really hard, that's child abuse. I'll tell you another form of child abuse, I would say, and I'm probably being a bit harsh, but it's sort of letting your kid spend 12 hours a day staring at his or her computer, because that is leading to bad things. So I agree with you. I think parents should be much more vigilant about letting their children disappear into the online world of laptops and tablets, TikTok, etc., etc. That's what we should be keeping an eye on, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. But you can also look at another form of child abuse, which you're seeing more regularly now, is kids that are massively overweight from.
Yeah, that's right. Letting your kids eat really bad food. Absolutely.
Parents aren't reprimanded for that, but they got lower. They keep going out. But if I may, Kev, just give you a personal example. So when you were talking to your earlier guest about the police and child services and stuff. So a couple of years ago, myself and my wife and our youngest son at the time was 2. Now he doesn't talk, and he's getting there, but he doesn't talk,
right.
And he had a tendency to lash out, frustrated, didn't like noises, close, a lot of people around.
Okay. So he's sort of got a condition, yeah?
Well, he hasn't been diagnosed, but he is on the autism spectrum.
Okay, right, fair enough. Okay, so carry on.
Well, he's great at everything else, but he does have his moments. But anyway, so we went to a Santa's brunch, me and my wife. We paid for it in advance, went there, sat down, and there was a lot of people there, a lot of noise, and he got a little bit upset. I went to pick him up, and he would butt you, but he'd pull his head back and he'd give you a butt. Now, he almost put me on the floor.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. How old is he? How old is he again, Carl? How old was he?
He was 2 at the time, but he's a big lad. He's a big lad.
Right.
Anyway, so we left the restaurant. We didn't even get to have our morning brunch or anything.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Get outside, put him in the car, but I had to physically restrain him, Kev, because he's so strong. He was clawing at my face and everything. Anyway, get him in the car, get home. About after 20 minutes of being at home, I went out back to work. My wife left there. She was just stayed in the house. The car was on the drive. About 15 minutes after getting home, my wife called me, "You're going to have to come home. There's police here."
Oh, God.
I went to beg your pardon. She went, "There's police here." Well, I didn't say I beg your pardon. I said something else. So I rushed home. They not only just come in my house, they parked and took my parking space on the drive. My wife answered the door. They introduced themselves to police and just walked in the house.
And what did they accuse you of child abuse or something?
So basically what happened is a member of the staff has seen me having to restrain my son and then called the police. We've got home, and now my wife, she's a brilliant mother. She was physically shaken up by this.
I'll bet.
My argument with the police officer was, well, these people get a snippet, a few seconds of what we go through on a daily basis. Yeah, they call the police, and we're now made to feel like we're criminals. And my wife, for days, was absolutely shook up. And I said to them, I think it's absolutely disgusting that you just barged away in my house. And he said, well, when children are concerned, I said, look, you've come in, my son's on the floor playing with us. It was like nothing ever happened.
Did they? I hope they didn't linger. They went on their way, did they?
I sent them on the way, Kev. I sent them on the way.
See, this is the problem, Carl. If you see some parent or some adult beating the hell out of a kid, then by all means, you should take steps to do something about that. Maybe call the police. But if we start making this a matter of law, what happened to you, I fear, will happen more and more and more. And as I keep saying, I'm sure you agree, I think the raising of your boy is your business, not the state's and not the police's. But I mean, having said that, you've got to be slightly careful. But I mean, this is what I mean. You should not have had to go through that, and I just worry about the culture we're creating when we make the way you bring up your kids a matter for the state as opposed to you. I think it's all wrong. But a harrowing story, Carl, and I'm glad it all worked out well. My regards to your wife and your boy. Thank you very much for an excellent call. Carl in Liverpool there. How about that? Let's go to break. When we come back, a couple more calls, a couple more messages, and one more WhatsApp voice note. And Petri Hoskin will be in the studio to let you know what she's got lined up for your entertainment from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. So still a little bit to come, so stay exactly where you are.
But I did speak to an attorney who has sat in on some of these hearings and spoken to some of the parties involved, and he believes that the Heritage Foundation will appeal, and that this document, despite it being very difficult to read for you or I, gives them enough ammunition to properly argue their case going forward. And that case is that Prince Harry's status, or if not status, but whether he was truthful or not, is a matter of public interest.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Go back to the phones in just a second. Interesting message, text from Matt in Shrewsbury. Or is it Shrewsbury? I say Shrewsbury. Maybe I'm wrong. So what Matt says is, my take on smacking is I was beaten a lot by my mother from the age of about 4, with quite some venom. I don't think it did any good. It just made resentment. I have 2 children, and for me, I find it strange as a 16-stone man that I would smack a tiny child. It literally doesn't work. It's the ultimate in bullying, if you ask me. Both my kids are well behaved without enduring physical punishment. There are a lot of parents who come to that decision. I've got a lot of sympathy with it. I haven't got kids, but I pretty much know I would not hit my kids. I'm sort of not like that, really. But I would maintain that other people, if they feel that it's their kids and if they feel that a little light physical punishment from time to time is the best way to bring up their own children, then I think it should be their decision and not the nanny state's. Last WhatsApp voice note from Lindsay on smacking.
Kev, these amendments aren't about hitting kids or anything like that. It's about the government taking more control, because in those amendments in this bill, there's also the right to homeschool being removed from parents. So if you don't like what your child is being taught, you don't have the option to homeschool. You have to be approved for homeschool. It's just an absolute disgrace. And this is what they keep doing, sneaking things in and burying it under other things that get the press, like this. Well, of course it makes sense to ban smacking. Most people would be for that. But when you look deeper into it, they've got other things hidden.
Well, good point, Lizzie. That's my point. I just worry that making smacking your kids illegal against the law is state overreach, nanny state overreach, none of the state's business. And 99.9% of parents won't abuse that. It's this distrust of the people by the authorities. Oh, well, if you don't make it illegal, all the parents in Britain will beat the hell out of their kids. You know, we're adults. We don't really need you to tell us what we can and cannot do. That's what I worry about. So I agree with you, Lindsay. You've got to be careful. If you give the state an inch, it'll take a mile. They want more and more control over us. And that's why I worry about a law against smacking your kids. It should be parents' decisions, not the decision of a bunch of former local councillors who got elected to Parliament to be MPs. So there you go. Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Peter in Croydon. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Kevin. Yeah, I mean, on the subject of child abuse, it's an unspoken thing in Israel. Children are being systematically being brainwashed into hating the Jews, and they want the elimination of Israel. That's been going on since 1948.
Well, Hamas' stated intention is to destroy Israel, the annihilation, the obliteration of Israel.
Well, exactly. But, well, I mean, people keep on all pro-Palestinian, but most of them hate Israel. And
what the pro-Palestinian factions here, or
the Gazans lot. I mean,
well, of course they do. Yeah, but Palestinians do tend to, or Gazans are not massive fans of Israel.
No, exactly, and that's because they've been brainwashed in your schools, aren't they, Kevin?
Well, yeah. I mean, they've got their. Yeah, you're right. They've got their education system. I mean, they believe they've sort of been displaced and that Israel's taken their rightful land and all that.
Exactly, yeah.
Others believe that Israel's got a right to it, or the Jewish people have a right to their own nation. Why shouldn't they have?
Yeah, exactly. But going back to my first point I was going to make is I can't understand these leaders like David Lammy. You got the Irish guy, so anti-Israel. I can't understand it. Israel have been pummeled for years and years and years. And growing up, we thought, because my granddad was Jewish, and my dad used to sit in front of looking at the news, and we thought it was just all about land, and that was it.
Well, I mean, it sort of is about land, but it's about a lot more than that. I mean, the point is like whether or not you believe that Israel or the Jewish people have a right to their own nation, particularly after they were subjected to the worst crime in the history of the human race, the Holocaust. So I believe they do have a right to their own land, and that we should defend them, and they're also our ally. And I don't have a whole lot of time for people who rape babies and kill women and kill people like Hamas. So I'm on Israel's side. Peter, thank you very much for a good call. Call me again. And I think we've got time. Yeah, let's talk to Dave in Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. Hi, Dave.
Hi, mate. Right, I've talked about 3 different items that you covered tonight, and I'll be very brief. I'll just put my comments to them. Right, surely the credit card thing, wasn't that covered by the expenses scandal a few years back?
What, the credit cards?
Yeah.
No. I mean, the expenses scandal was for MPs. That's MPs. These credit cards are for civil servants. They're not politicians.
Right. Next one is asylum seekers. Wasn't there a jet that got hijacked and then it landed in Stansted?
Some years ago. Yeah, I remember that.
Some years ago. And weren't they then granted asylum?
You may be right. I mean, I wouldn't put it past this mad country, but I'd have to look that up, Dave. Third question?
Yeah. Right. On the ceasefire that Trump and blah, blah, they're saying, oh, I don't trust Putin. I don't trust Trump. But one of the conditions, I only heard it mentioned once, that Putin wanted a ceasefire in the Black Sea, only because Ukraine controls a lot of the Black Sea and even sunk their flagship.
Well, there's a cargo problem around the Black Sea, around Odessa. I think most countries want to be able to use that water and use that area. So it's all very complicated, Dave. But listen, good call. 3 questions. Don't think I answered any of them very well, but it was nice to talk to you. Call me again. That's Dave in Cambridgeshire, and she's in the studio. Hello, Petri. Petri Hoskin, that is. She's
well, it's Petri. I mean, how many other Petris do you know?
That's true, actually. It's a good point. It's a good point. The one and only Petri Hoskin. What have you got coming up?
Right, we're going to be talking, we're heading off to the US to discuss with a strategic institute about what's going on with the call from Zelensky and what that and Trump and what that means, and how the language, when you say a frank call, it usually means not a very good call, but they've said a very good call, so that means a good call. So I just want to talk about relations and everything that's going on there. So we'll be looking at that. And we've got